The midday sun bore down upon Dustwater Gulch with merciless intensity. In a town forgotten by time, where the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and desperation, Marisol Reyes clutched her thin blanket, her only possession, as the creaking wooden wheels of the auction platform came to rest. Dustwater's auction block had become a grim stage for the destitute, widowed mothers bartering their daughters, indebted families surrendering sons, and broken lives traded for a few coins. Today, Marisol, a 13-year-old sewing girl, found herself at the mercy of strangers. Marisol's heart pounded like a war drum in her chest. The platform trembled beneath her as she took a hesitant step forward. Her dark hair, once neatly braided by her mother's practiced hands, had loosened and knotted during their harsh journey from the settlement 5 miles north. The sweat on her forehead mingled with fine strands of hair, darkening the edges of her pale, freckled skin. She kept her head bowed, glancing only at the dust clouds kicked up by the restless crowd gathered in front of the platform. Her sunken, green eyes flickered with fear and something else, an ember of hope she could not extinguish, no matter how her circumstances tried. At her side, the auctioneer, a gaunt man named Clement Clay Marston, raised a weathered wooden gavel. His voice, low and gravelly, reached across the open space. "Ladies and gentlemen, step right up. Finest young sewing girl you'll find this side of the Pecos. Only 13 summers, with nimble fingers and a will to work. Worth every spare." "Dime!" He paused, tapping the gavel against the platform to punctuate his words. "Who'll start the bidding for Miss Marisol Reyes?" A hush fell over the crowd, punctuated only by the distant rattling of a tin wash bucket against a wooden fence. Marisol's breath caught as she felt dozens of eyes on her, sizing her up as if she were a sack of grain. Each face blurred together, a chain-smoking blacksmith with a crooked grin, a pair of ranch hands in battered hats, and a stooped widow clutching a shawl around her shoulders. In Dustwater, people bought necessity instead of novelty. If a household needed a seamstress, they had to pay the price. Today, that price was Marisol. From the corner of her eye, she spotted a tall, broad-shouldered figure pushing through the crowd. His boots, dusty from travel, thudded against the wooden planks. He stood shirtless, the sun revealing broad shoulders etched with scars, each telling a tale of struggle. Rolled sleeves revealed thick forearms, stained by hard labor. Despite the oppressive heat, he wore a battered hat pulled low, shadowing his eyes. Marisol's pulse quickened at the sight. He was a stranger to Dustwater, but not to hardship. She sensed immediately that he would not exploit her weaknesses. Instead, he would see her as someone to protect, or as a tool to save himself. The bidding began, voices competing for her. $20! 30! 30, and she's mine! Marisol willed her hands to stop trembling. Each rising bid felt like a lifetime passing in slow motion. The numbers climbed as she imagined leaving this dusty stage forever, transported to a new life under the guidance of the highest bidder. When the tall stranger stepped forward, Marisol noticed he was careful not to brush her, an unspoken courtesy in a brutal practice. His voice was calm but firm. $40. At $40, the widow withdrew. Another ranch hand countered. With 50, the stranger held his ground. 70, 80, the tension rippled through the crowd. Finally, at a solid $90, the stranger turned to the auctioneer. "Sold," Clay Marston declared, pointing to Marisol. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, echoing through Dustwater Gulch like the roar of a gunshot. Marisol swallowed, her pulse pounding as her fate sealed with that single motion. The stranger extended a gloved hand, and after a brief moment of frozen disbelief, she grasped it. He lifted her from the platform and carried her through the milling onlookers, who parted grudgingly. Despite her fear, Marisol felt a spark of relief mingled with uncertainty. They walked toward a black horse tied to a post near the saloon entrance. The stranger lowered her onto the bleached wooden sidewalk and knelt to meet her eyes. "Marisol Reyes," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My name is Ezekiel Blackwood, but folks call me Zeke. I'm a rancher from Mule Ridge, just over the ridge yonder. I've seen you work. I have no immediate need for a seamstress, but I've got a hospital 2 miles south where my youngest brother lies bitten by a rattler. He needs his good clothes mended, and I need someone I can trust." Marisol blinked, uncertain. "Sir, I've never been a nurse. I can sew, but I don't know what to do at a hospital." Her voice shook, betraying the tight knot in her chest. Ezekiel's gaze remained unwavering, kind yet determined. "You'll learn," he said with a half-smile, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "We'll get there before nightfall. Can you ride?" Marisol nodded, the blanket around her shoulders drooping as relief and fear warred inside her. She followed Zeke to the horse. Her legs, stiff from the platform's unforgiving height, slid against the horse's flank. Zeke steadied her motion, murmuring assurances she could barely hear. When she was seated, perched on a simple saddle, he swung up behind her. Marisol clutched the saddle horn as Zeke gave a quiet command. "Easy, girl," to the horse. Together, they trotted out of Dustwater, leaving behind the raucous crowd and the auction block that had been Marisol's world moments ago. As they rode, the landscape stretched out in rolling plains, dusted with parched grass. Cinder-black mesas loomed in the distance, their jagged silhouettes cutting into the sky. Marisol stared at them with wide eyes, trying to memorize every contour. Memories of that platform would haunt her dreams, but a new reality beckoned. Zeke guided her with patient words. "Hold on tight. Lean with me on turns. Don't look down too much." His voice was a steady anchor in her spinning mind. In the silence that fell between them, Marisol thought of her mother's face, soft, warm, alive. It had been 6 months since a fever claimed her. Her father, broken by debt and grief, had sold her to pay for the medicines that came too late. Marisol's chest constricted as she imagined him back home, raving to himself over emptiness and failure. She swallowed hard, refusing to let tears blur her vision. Not now. Not until she was safe. Behind her, Zeke's steady breathing and the rhythmic clop of the horse's hooves against dry earth formed a lullaby of sorts. When twilight painted the horizon in streaks of blood orange and lilac, they arrived at a small cluster of buildings nestled at the foot of a low ridge. A pale glow spilled from curtained windows, promising warmth, perhaps even comfort. Zeke helped her from the saddle and offered his arm. Marisol's legs felt wobbly as she dismounted. When her boots touched the ground, she realized how hungry and thirsty she was. The acrid tang of smoke and healer's herbs mingled in the air, palpable against the chill settling in the valley. They entered a modest structure, a one-room settlement hospital powered by kerosene lamps and staffed by a solitary nurse known as Abilene McGraw. The nurse's face was sharp, her gaze wary as she took in Marisol's dusty, disheveled form. Zeke set Marisol's blanket aside and knelt beside a narrow cot where a boy lay wrapped in blood-stained bandages. "Doctor," Abilene said, though no doctor had come. "If you're here to buy this girl, I've already got enough mouths to feed. There's no work for her here." Zeke's voice was quiet but firm. "She's not a burden. She's got skill with a needle. She can mend clothes while I hunt that. Rattlesnake's venom. I need someone I trust." He placed a gentle hand on Marisol's shoulder, and she felt a rush of warmth, both comforting and terrifying. Marisol swallowed, steadying herself. She believed her mother's lessons. A clean stitch could mend more than fabric. It could seal hope where it threatened to fray. She approached a battered table piled with torn linens. The factory-made seamstress kit her mother had given her sat in her hands like a lifeline. She dipped a finger into a bowl of soapy water and wiped the tears from her cheeks. Then she knelt beside Abilene, drawing a deep breath. "I can help," Marisol said, her voice wavering but resolute. She unrolled a length of thread and matched it to the uniform that lay in tatters on the table. "I'll do my best to patch these torn robes." Abeline studied her for a long moment, then handed her a thin fabric glove, nothing more than a nod. Night deepened around them as Marisol worked by dim lamplight. Each stitch was slow, deliberate. She thought of her mother's lullabies, how each note had once guided her to sleep. Tonight, the lullaby was her own heartbeat, reminding her to breathe, reminding her she would not break. As the moon climbed high, Marisol finished mending the last tear and examined her work with a critical eye. Satisfied, she let her head drop. To her chest, exhaustion washing over her. Outside, a lone coyote called, its mournful howl carrying on the wind. Zeke sat nearby, cleaning his rifle for the dawn. His strong profile, backlit by lantern glow, looked more like a guardian than a rescuer. But Marisol knew better. Salvation came with a price, and she had yet to understand what Zeke truly demanded. Her eyelids fluttered shut, and the world slipped into darkness. Yet even in sleep, her mind churned with questions. What would dawn bring? Would she finally be free of her past, or would the life she'd given away still haunt her? And most pressing, what would Zeke do to save his brother, and how would that change her fate? Marisol's dreams were not of sugar plums, but of flickering flames and endless plains. She dreamed of her mother's face, pale and serene in memory, and woke with a gasp when the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the wooden walls. She sat up, heart thundering, as Zeke's shadow fell across her cot. In his hand, he held a battered leather pouch. Inside, she could see the glint of something unmistakable, silver coins. He knelt beside her, setting the pouch on the floor. "Time to ride," he murmured, voice as steady as a mountain spring. Marisol's throat tightened. She stood, gathering her blanket and the remnants of sleep from her mind. The pungent aroma of sage and blood lingered as she stepped into the dim hallway. Zeke pointed toward the stable. "Mount up," he said. Outside, the world still slept, but the ridgeline cast long shadows over the valley floor. Marisol reached for the saddle, her fingers brushing the leather. She hesitated, recalling her mother's soft voice. "Trust yourself." Then she climbed into the saddle, settling into the rough-hewn leather. Zeke mounted behind her, placing a gloved hand at her waist. Their silhouettes merged, one form straining forward into a future neither fully understood. The horse lurched forward, hooves clattering on packed earth. Marisol gripped the horn, eyes trained on the path ahead. Behind her, Zeke's quiet breathing was a constant reminder she was not alone in this journey, but this path was hers to walk. Dawn's light revealed something unexpected. A faint trail of blood leading to the scrub brush nearby. Marisol's breath caught as she felt a ripple of dread pass through her. The trail glimmered crimson in the morning sun, winding like a serpent through the pale grasses. She glanced at Zeke, who followed. Her gaze, his jaw tightened. Without a word, he nudged the horse in pursuit of the trail. Marisol felt her pulse quicken. Danger lay ahead, something neither of them anticipated. The blood trail led them to a collapsed form of a rattlesnake, its massive body coiled around the mangled remains of a smaller creature. The sight was grotesque, even for a rancher accustomed to brutality. Zeke dismounted slowly, scanning the horizon. "Too late," he whispered, voice laced with sorrow. "This was my brother's horse. He tried to save the snake's den. He's out there somewhere, badly hurt." Marisol felt her heart constrict. She had thought she knew the stakes, but now the cost was personal and raw. She slid from the saddle, the sun warm on her back. Zeke approached the rattlesnake's den at a cautious pace, every muscle tensed. Marisol followed, trying to steady her breathing. In the underbrush, a faint moan echoed. Zeke paused, fist clenched around the reins. He nodded toward the brush, and they crept forward. There, caught beneath a fallen mesquite branch, lay a young man, barely older than Marisol, pale and trembling. His leg was pinned, a venomous bite oozing along his calf. His eyes fluttered with pain and disbelief as he recognized his brother. Zeke dropped to his knees, yanking the branch free with a strength Marisol didn't know he possessed. The younger man slumped into his brother's arms. Marisol knelt beside them, fumbling for a bandage from her small kit. She felt her fingers tremble as she tore cloth and tied it around his leg. She could smell the sour tang of snake venom, bitter and metallic. Zeke's face hardened. "Get him on the horse. We ride for the valley fast." Marisol lifted the limp form of Zeke's brother while he set about helping. Each shift of weight felt like lifting a boulder, but she refused to falter. They placed the wounded young man across the horse's back. Marisol gathered the reins. Zeke mounted quickly behind his brother. He cast one glance back at Marisol, an unspoken trust. They spurred the horse into a gallop, the world around them blurring into streaks of gold and green. Marisol's stomach lurched as the dawn wind whipped her hair. She stared straight ahead, breath ragged. The thought that she might lose this boy, this stranger, drove her forward. As they raced toward safety, Marisol's mind buzzed. She had traded one kind of auction block for another, the battlefield between life and death. Her fate was intertwined with theirs now. If she failed, the boy would die, and Zeke's wrath would be unleashed on her or the world. If she succeeded, she might carve out a place where her past no longer hunted her. Every hoofbeat struck her, like a warning. Either she would rise to the challenge or be crushed beneath its weight. A sudden cloud of dust billowed ahead, the gateway to the valley's clinic coming into view. Ibeline waited, her sharp eyes wide with panic as she replaced lanterns along the path. The horse burst through the corral gate, and Marisol leapt to the ground, yanking her brother away from the saddle. She pressed her hand to his forehead, flushed and aching, while Zeke barked orders. In the dim lamplight, Marisol cleaned the wound as best she could, the boy's ragged breaths mingling with her own. Then, with hands stained by blood and sweat, she looked up at Zeke. He stared back, with a quiet intensity that made her pulse thunder. She realized that dawn had changed everything. She lifted her eyes to the window, where the first rays of sun cut through the gloom. And as the horizon glowed crimson, Marisol recognized a truth she could not deny. Survival demanded sacrifice, and her bargain had only just begun. The boy groaned, eyes fluttering open. He focused on Zeke, then on Marisol. His lips parted, voice weak. Why did you—" A thunderous roar split the air. The distant howl of stampeding horses approached. Marisol spun toward the doorway. Dust churned outside, and silhouettes burst into view. A dozen men, faces twisted with fury, brandishing rifles and torches. They had come for Zeke, come for blood or ransom. Marisol's heart clenched as she saw the leader's pale blue eyes lock onto hers. Recognition flashed in that gaze, someone who had lost more than she could imagine. Zeke rose, hand on his rifle, stance defiant. He had thought dawn would bring healing. Instead, it brought war. Marisol's breath caught as the men closed in. Her hands shook on the boy's arm. Zeke's brother let out a hoarse cry. "It's too late! We're surrounded!" Marisol's stomach dropped. The world tilted on its axis. She had no guarantee of safety, yet turning back was impossible. Every stitch, every step, every choice had led to this moment. A scorching sun rose behind the mob, casting long shadows that stretched across the dirt floor like crooked fingers. Zeke's jaw clenched. "Marisol, get ready." She swallowed hard as the door burst open. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." Dustwater Gulch's clinic erupted into chaos as the mob of men poured through the door, their faces contorted with fury and grim purpose. Torches hissed, casting flickering shadows that danced across the rough-hewn walls. Marisol Reyes bolted, upright, heart-pounding, as Zeke Blackwood slid to one knee, rifle raised. His brother's breathing rasped, each inhale a testament to his weakening state. Blood matted the wound on his calf, and sweat slicked his pale forehead. "Stand down!" Zeke's voice rang out, steady as steel. "We aren't looking to start a war here." But the mob advanced without hesitation. Their leader, a tall figure with pale blue eyes and a jagged scar beneath his right cheekbone, barked an order that crackled like lightning. "Seize them both! They're traitors to Dustwater. They must pay." Marisol's pulse thundered. She pressed a trembling hand to the wounded brother's chest, trying to steady him. She glanced at Zeke, whose face reflected grim determination. She knew little of the feud that had brought Dustwater's wrath upon them, but she recognized the unspoken truth. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The mob surged forward. Zeke shoved the wounded brother behind him. Marisol lunged to Zeke's side, snatching up a rusted iron lamp from the bedside table. The flame flickered as dust swirled around her. Behind her, Abilene McGraw slammed a metal tray against the wall, overriding panic with defiance. "You don't belong." "Here!" Abilene shouted, brandishing a syringe. The mob scoffed at her attempt to stand their ground. Several men charged Abilene, shoving her aside as they closed in on Zeke. His rifle barked, shots tearing into the air, forcing the mob to recoil for a moment. A splintered wooden beam cracked behind Marisol's ear as they fired back, reducing the clinic's modest lamplight to a stuttering glow. Marisol's breath hitched. The wounded brother moaned, clutching his calf. Marisol knelt beside him. "We have to move him," she hissed, voice raw with fear. She cradled his head, feeling the damp heat of his sweat. "Can you stand?" He shook his head, eyes half-lidded. "I can't. It hurts." Tears pricked at Marisol's eyes. She ran a hand through his hair. "Then we'll carry you. Come on." She placed one arm beneath his shoulders. Zeke appeared beside her, lifting the brother's legs. Together they staggered toward the rear entrance, a narrow corridor leading to the barn, where Zeke kept his fastest horse. "Cover us!" Zeke barked. "Abilene, hold them off!" He pushed open the door, and a wave of frigid dawn air swept into the clinic. Dust and straw skittered across the floor. Marisol winced as the wounded brother's pain intensified, and she pressed a cloth to his leg to stem the bleeding. Abilene shouted curses at the mob, hurling various medical instruments to create a makeshift barrier. The mob hesitated as her fury met their greed. Marisol slammed the door shut behind them, plunging the corridor into near darkness. The high-pitched shriek of shattering glass echoed behind them, Abilene's last stand. Zeke thrust Marisol and his brother into the straw-strewn stall. "I'll circle around and distract them," he whispered. His hand brushed hers in a firm grip, steadying her. Marisol nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Footsteps pounded behind the barn door. Zeke yanked the latch and slipped outside like a shadow, leaving Marisol alone with the wounded boy. She pressed herself against the cool wood, lavender-scented, beneath her torn dress. The boy's breathing rattled like a mixtape of panic and pain. She bit her lip. "Hang on," she murmured. "I won't let them get you." Outside, Zeke crept through the dim dawn light, his rifle cradled as if it were an extension of his arm. The mob had spread out, searching for any sign of escape. Their leader barked orders in a harsh whisper, moving like a predator. Zeke peered around a corner, scanning the dust-choked pathway. He spotted a small supply pouch lying beside a trough, his rations from last night. With a grit of determination, he kicked it toward the mob's flank, causing 3 men to dive aside as tin cups and biscuits scattered across the ground. "What was that?" someone cursed, stumbling. Zeke seized the moment, firing a warning shot into the dirt between their legs. The mob recoiled, momentarily startled by the commotion. Zeke ducked behind a barrel, heart pounding. Each breath felt like a gamble. He could see the barn's silhouette beyond him, the thick wooden plank still stained with the night's turmoil. He dared not think of the cost if he failed. Inside the stall, Marisol measured the passing seconds by the boy's shallow gasps. She pressed her lips to his ear. "Stay with me," she whispered. She ripped a strip of her dress, wrapping it around his calf as tightly as she dared. His eyelids fluttered, sweat purling at his temples. She rummaged through her small kit, bandages, salves, a vial of morphine stolen from Abilene's supplies. She drew the syringe, trembling as she guided the needle into his shoulder. He whimpered, but the morphine took effect, and his body gradually stilled. Then, a thud. The door rattled. Heavy footsteps approached. Zeke or their enemies? Marisol, tensed, cradling the boy's head. A voice snarled from the other side. "Come out, Blackwood. We know you're here." Marisol's blood turned to ice. If they broke through the door, there would be no escape. She scanned the stall. Only a narrow window high above ground offered a potential exit, but the boy was too heavy to move. "Zeke," she whispered, despair creeping into her voice. Back outside, Zeke crept around the side of the barn, rifle raised. He caught sight of their leader creeping toward the back door, weapon drawn. Fear gnawed at Zeke's gut. He had to protect Marisol and his brother. With a burst of speed, Zeke charged, firing once, twice, striking the leader's thigh. The man barked in pain, stumbling backward. The remaining mob froze at the sudden violence. "Zeke!" a voice yelled. The wounded brother's faint cry echoed in Zeke's mind. Guilt and urgency spurred him forward. He charged toward the back door as a dozen rifles pivoted to follow him. Gunfire erupted. If he hesitated, the mob would find the boy and Marisol. He dove through the door just as the stall's roof shook with impact. Bullets punched through the wood, splintering planks overhead. Dust and hay rained down. Marisol's eyes widened as Zeke crashed beside her, rifle raised. "Get behind me," he snarled. His jaw clenched as he planted bullets into the floorboards. The mob's shadows loomed outside, flickering with torchlight. Zeke's breathing was ragged, but his rifle never wavered. He saw Marisol's pale face, ghostly in the dim light. "We have to move him," he hissed, reaching for the wounded brother. Marisol shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "It's too dangerous. They'll kill us if we try." Zeke's gaze flicked toward her. "We have no choice. The morphine will wear off soon. If we stay, he'll bleed out. Then they'll catch us unprepared. I need you to help me carry him out the window." She hesitated, but Zeke's piercing stare left no room for argument. She nodded, scrambling to position herself beneath the window. Zeke lifted her brother's shoulders. Marisol slid beneath his legs. The weight was like lifting a sack of lead, but together they heaved him upward. Zeke's knees dug into the dirt as he pushed, and Marisol climbed onto the sill, shoving. The brother's torso out first. He landed with a soft thud on the damp ground outside, and Zeke quickly slid through the narrow frame. Marisol followed, slipping through to the outside world, blood pounding in her ears. She dropped to her knees, gasping as she took in their surroundings, the early morning sky, pale and vast above them, the wind whispering through the sagebrush. But the scent of danger was unmistakable, gunpowder, sweat, hatred. Zeke crouched beside the brother, tearing a strip of cloth from his own shirt to tie the leg. Marisol pressed a hand to the boy's forehead. His face was ashen, but he still breathed. Behind them, the mob emerged from the barn, rifles at the ready. Zeke glanced at Marisol. "Run! Get help!" "Where?" she panted as Zeke shoved a battered pistol into her hand. "Go east, past the ridge. Find Charlie's tavern. My friend Charlie will help us. Now go!" Marisol's throat constricted, fear and guilt choking her. But Zeke shoved her toward the scrub. "No time! I'll hold them off. Move!" She lingered, torn between saving Zeke and helping her brother. Zeke's voice softened, though his grip remained firm. "Don't question me! Now go!" Marisol struck out across the parched ground, the pistol heavy in her hand. She stumbled through knee-high grass, breath ragged, every second feeling like an eternity. Over her shoulder, she heard Zeke's shots ripping into the air. Sharp cracks that echoed across the canyon, then scuffling grunts and a final roar of rage. She didn't look back. Ahead, the jagged ridge rose like a challenge. She sprinted, heedless of the burning pain in her legs. The early sun scorched her skin, and sweat slicked her forehead. She reached the crest, her lungs burning, and saw the squat building of Charlie's. Tavern nestled at the valley's edge. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth and safety. Through the door, Charlie DeLuca, a grizzled rancher with a heart of iron, gaped at her blood-splattered dress and wild eyes. His hand rested on his Winchester rifle. "Marisol, what in God's name—" Charlie stammered. She gasped. "They've taken my friend's brother. They're hunting us. He's wounded. He's in the gorge. Please help him." Charlie's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed with recognition. "Zeke, he's in trouble. The Blackwood Ridge isn't far from here. Show me the way." Marisol pointed toward a narrow path, snaking down the valley floor. "This way. Hurry. I can't lose him and Zeke both." Tears streamed down her face. Charlie grabbed his rifle and motioned for Marisol to follow. Together, they sprinted toward the winding track leading to the river gorge. Back at the barn, Zeke's world narrowed to two things: providing cover fire and keeping his brother alive. Bullets pummeled the rough planks, but Zeke's stance never wavered. His rifle cracked in rapid succession, forcing the mob to flinch and retreat. Each time he reloaded, he glanced at his brother's bloodied form, pressing gauze against the wound as if it could stem the tide of death. His breaths came in ragged gulps as he watched the barn's single window, a faint hope that Marisol and Charlie would arrive. Moments felt like hours. Every distant crack of gunfire made Zeke hesitate. He feared the worst. Suddenly, a hail of bullets slammed into the barn's roof, splintering beams overhead. Wood fragments rained upon him, and he snarled, raising his rifle. One shot rang out from above. Charlie perched on a ledge. The lead struck the mob's leader in the shoulder, forcing him backward. Zeke seized the moment. He grabbed the brother's shoulders, dragging him toward the window. The boy's face was pale as death, yet he clung to consciousness. Zeke hoisted him upward, heart hammering. Marisol emerged from below, huffing, her eyes wide. "Charlie's down," she panted, voice cracking. "He took a grazing shot. We have only minutes." Zeke nodded, lifting the brother's torso through the window. Marisol followed, lowering him to the ground. Zeke pulled her behind him just as the roof collapsed in a thunderous crash, burying much of the barn beneath a blanket of debris. Dust choked the air. Bullets whizzed through the gap where they had been moments ago. "I'll lead them off." "Take him to the river's edge," Zeke said, pushing Marisol toward the path. "Don't stop." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "Watch your back, Zeke." He dipped his head, fierce sadness in his eyes. "I'll be fine. Now go." Marisol grabbed her brother's arm, urging him forward, while Charlie clutched his wounded shoulder, firing double-barreled shots at the mob. They disappeared into the golden haze of the morning sun. Zeke's silhouette, the last thing Marisol saw before he slipped behind a rocky outcrop. They trudged down the narrow path toward the river, each footstep a battle. Marisol clutched her brother's hand, trying to ignore the hollow ache in her chest. The distant echoes of gunfire grew fainter, mingling with the calls of prairie hawks soaring overhead. At the river's edge, they found a hidden cave sprayed with dew-laden ferns. Marisol gently laid her brother upon a bed of soft moss as Charlie pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding leg. The river's roar soothed the edges of Marisol's panic. She knelt beside her brother, drawing a ragged breath. "You're going to be all right. Zeke will come for us." The boy's eyes fluttered open. He saw her face lined with grime and worry. Are we safe? Marisol's throat caught. Yes, for now. But we can't stay long. They'll come for us again. He tried to sit up, but his strength failed him. He collapsed back. I'm hungry, thirsty. Marisol moved to the riverbank, scooping water into her cupped hands. The icy liquid stung her skin, but she drank deeply, then refilled the cup to give to the boy. His lips brushed the water. Relief washed across his features. She felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. Charlie knelt beside her. We'll need to patch him up, gather supplies. The ravine runs north for miles. We can follow it until we reach Zeke's claim. He'll know what to do. Marisol nodded, her mind racing. I can stitch a tourniquet he won't break. Charlie pressed a gentle hand to her shoulder. You've done enough. I'll gather herbs and clean water. You rest, Mara. This boy needs you in top shape. Marisol hesitated, then slumped back, exhaustion dragging her limbs. She watched as Charlie disappeared into the brush. The cave's damp coolness wrapped around her like a shroud. She braced herself against the need to collapse. Her mind flickered to Zeke, his wingspan broad, his determination unyielding. She longed for his return, but dread clutched at her heart. What if he didn't make it? In the half-light, she turned her gaze to her brother. His breathing had steadied, each breath a fragile promise of life. She pressed a hand to her chest. Stay with me, she whispered. Please. He gave a weak nod. Marisol closed her eyes, allowing fatigue to overtake her. She let her memory drift. To her mother's warm hands guiding hers through intricate stitches, the memory buoyed her spirit. She would not fail him, not now. Outside, the wind whispered through the ferns. Distant thunder rolled like a warning. Inside the cave, Marisol sat vigil at the river's edge, determined to hold on until Zeke's return. The sun climbed overhead, promising a new day, but in Dustwater Gulch, each dawn brought blood and sacrifice. Marisol rose, drawing a ragged breath. She stepped down to gather broken sticks and stones for a fire. The ranger's voice from Zeke's lingering presence echoed in her mind. Survival demands sacrifice. She lit a spark. The flame flickered, then roared to life, casting dancing shadows on the cave's rough walls. She warmed herself, the heat seeping into her bones, warding off the chill of fear. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth startled her. She froze, heart pounding, eyes scanning for signs of movement. A shape emerged, Zeke's brother gingerly testing his weight. His eyes widened, surprise and gratitude mingling on his lips. Mara, you stayed, he whispered, voice full of wonder. Marisol knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his forehead. I promised, you're safe now, as safe as we can be. He grimaced as he shifted. Zeke, he fought them off. For us. Marisol's chest tightened. She swallowed, but her legs trembled. He's a good man. He'll come. A distant crack echoed through the ravine like a rifle shot. Marisol's heart lurched. She rose, turning toward the mouth of the cave. Each footstep felt like a lifetime. She knelt beside her brother once more. Stay hidden. Tell me if anyone comes. He nodded, eyes flickering with panic and trust. Marisol stepped out into the bright sunlight. The valley stretched before her, golden and as ruthless as any battleground. She scanned the horizon. No sign of Zeke's broad shoulders, no dust plume of horses, only the whispering sage and the hum of insects. Her pulse skittered. She knelt, cupping her hand around her mouth. Zeke, she called. Zeke, where are you? Silence answered. Her chest tightened. The corners of her vision darkened as fear gnawed at her resolve. With each passing moment, dread mounted. What if Zeke had fallen? What if he never returned? Suddenly, A figure broke through the rim of the ridge. Zeke, blood-smeared and limping, rifle slung over one shoulder. Relief surged through Marisol like a tidal wave. She ran toward him, the ground blurring beneath her feet. Zeke glanced back, spotting her. A faint smile cracked across his dusty face. He stumbled, and Marisol reached him, steadying his shoulder. "Mara," he rasped, pain and relief lacing his voice. "I came back." Their eyes locked, and in that moment Marisol realized the full weight of their bond, made stronger by sacrifice and forged in blood. "All right," she whispered, gripping his arm. "Let's save your brother, and then we ride far from here." He nodded, pressing a hand to his side. Together, behind them, the ravine yawned like a hungry beast, silent for the moment but waiting. And as Marisol and Zeke rose to face the battle yet to come, the wind carried a whispered promise. This fight was not over, and their choices would echo through Dustwater Gulch for years to come. The dawn sky shifted from gold to white, and the ravine's shadows deepened. With Zeke and Charlie's brother at her side, Marisol understood. Survival might demand sacrifice, but hope, fragile as it was, could endure if they refused to let it die. The wind sighed through the sage, carrying their determination like a prayer across the sunburnt land. Their next step would decide everything. Zeke's gunshot rang through the morning air, ripping Marisol from her momentary relief. She turned as he sank to one knee, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and vivid against the pale canvas of his shirt. Panic seized her. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. "Hold on," she murmured, voice trembling. "It's going to be okay." His chest rose and fell in shallow gulps, each breath a struggle. "Mara, my brother," he gasped, eyes flickering toward the cave. Marisol bit her lip, eyes stinging. She knew they didn't have time. Charlie appeared at the cave's mouth, rifle in hand, surveying the ravine's edge. "They're closing in from above. We need to move him now." Marisol's throat constricted. She looked at Zeke, whose face was ashen. He nodded once, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. She rose, gripping her knees to steady herself. "Help me drag him inside," she whispered to Charlie. The two of them hoisted Zeke's weight between them and pulled him into the cave. Zeke stumbled as he entered, sweat slicking his brow. Charlie slammed a makeshift barricade of rocks across the entrance, sealing them inside. The cave's dim interior offered scant protection. Marisol guided Zeke to sit beside his brother, whose eyes opened in recognition and gratitude. Marisol tore a strip from Zeke's shirt, knotting a tight band of cloth around Zeke's side. Blood seeped through the fabric in dark blooms. She winced at the sight, pressing her palm against his ribs. "Hold still," she whispered. "I need to clean it." She drew a damp cloth from her satchel, soaked earlier in river water to clean her brother's wounds. Guilt and determination waged a war in her chest. "I'm so sorry I let you get shot, Zeke." He exhaled through clenched teeth. "You did what you had to do." Marisol applied a salve she had squeezed from a small vial. It stung like fire on broken skin, but Zeke held firm, jaw clenched. When it came time to wrap the wound, Marisol's fingers trembled. "Stay with me, Zeke," she whispered as she tied the makeshift bandage. Zeke's breathing steadied. "What about Dustwater?" he asked, voice low. His gaze flicked to his brother, who lay pale and shivering. Marisol brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "We'll come back for Dustwater, but right now we save you and him, then we disappear." He nodded. "Then we have to go to Mule Ridge. My friend Larkin has a cabin beyond the mountains. She'll help us get back on our feet." Charlie, kneeling beside the wounded brother, looked through the cave's narrow opening. "They're scouring the ravine. They'll find us soon unless we leave now." He turned to Marisol. "You sure you can carry him?" "Yes," she said, steeling herself. The weight of Zeke's brother pressed against her, but she refused to falter. She slipped beneath his body, wrapping her arms around his chest, while Charlie grabbed his legs. Zeke adopted a staggering gait, clutching the cave's walls to steady himself. "Let's go." The three of them shuffled through the darkness, the world beyond a swirl of light and dust. Zeke paused at the cave's mouth, peering into the sun's glare. He raised his hand to shield his eyes. "I'll distract them. You two head north, through the wooded hill. I'll meet you at Larkin's cabin. Go!" Marisol's heart twisted. "No!" But Charlie ushered her forward. "He'll make it. He's the fastest horseman I know. Go, Mara. Your brother needs you." Marisol turned, swallowed her fear, and stumbled into the brush. She bore her brother's weight as though carrying a boulder across her shoulders. The world blurred around her, sunlight streaking through leaves like shards of glass. She bit back tears, determined not to show weakness. Charlie escorted her through the dense thicket. Each footstep was a struggle, but Marisol refused to rest. Behind them, a cacophony of shouts and gunshots marked Zeke's diversion. "We're almost to the stream," Charlie said, voice low. "Once we cross, the trail to Mule Ridge is half a day's ride. Larkin will keep you safe." Marisol nodded, her temple throbbing. She stumbled, nearly dropping her burden of flesh and bone. Charlie steadied her with a firm hand. They reached the river where Marisol had given water to her brother. The current was swift, icy cold, but it was their only path. Charlie waded in first, bracing against the current. Marisol followed, her boots squelching beneath her. The river pulled at her legs, threatening to topple her. She tightened her grip on her brother's limp form, eyes fixed on the opposite. Bank snowmelt from the mountains sent shards of ice swirling around their boots. Marisol gasped as the cold bit into her skin, but Charlie's steady presence kept her focused. With an effort that felt like tearing her soul in two, she pressed forward. They stumbled onto the far bank, breathless. Marisol brushed a hand through, her damp hair, relief and fatigue warring within her. Charlie helped her to higher ground. "We need to rest. He's lost a lot of blood." He pointed to a shaded nook beneath a gnarled oak. The soft earth gave way beneath Marisol's knees. She set her brother gingerly on a bed of fallen leaves. His breathing was slow and shallow. "He'll be okay," Marisol whispered, drawing a tearful breath. "I promise." Charlie knelt and inspected the leg wound. "I can fashion a proper splint from these branches and some of my bandages." Marisol exhaled, a shaky breath. "Yes, please." She closed her eyes, the weight of everything crashing onto her. She thought of her mother's gentle hands, of the sharp clang of the auctioneer's gavel, of the clinic's dank air. Each memory lanced her heart, but she channeled her grief into action. Charlie snapped 2 dry saplings, creating a brace. He tied them to her brother's leg with strips of cloth. Marisol held it steady as he tightened the bindings. When he finished, the makeshift splint held firm. "Better," Charlie said, closing his travel pack. "We'll need to move soon. The sun's rising high. By mid-afternoon, the heat will force us to seek shade, and the mob will be everywhere." Marisol nodded, rising. She brushed dust from her dress, wincing as her leg muscles protested. "I'll carry him to Larkin's cabin." "You sure?" Charlie asked, concern etched in his weathered face. "That's miles away over rough terrain." Marisol's jaw set. "I have to try." They set out along a faint trail winding through juniper and mesquite. Heat rose in shimmering waves from the sun-baked ground. Marisol carried her brother as if he were a fragile doll, each step a searing reminder of her promise to protect him. Charlie walked beside her, his rifle slung over his shoulder, ever watchful. By midday, the air shimmered with haze. Marisol's pack, slung across her back, weighed her down. She found herself stumbling, legs trembling. Charlie reached out, cradling her arm. "Lean on me," he whispered. "We're almost to the ridge." Marisol nodded, pressing her cheek against her brother's silent form. Suddenly, he groaned, eyes fluttering open. Marisol gasped and knelt beside him, brushing her fingers against his forehead. Sweat beaded on his skin. "You're awake," she murmured. "How do you feel?" He blinked, expression wary. "Hungry. Thirsty. Where's Zeke?" Marisol's chest tightened. He's okay. He's on his way with help. We're going. To Larkin's cabin. She'll fix you up. His lips curved with a faint smile. You saved me, Mara. Thank you. Marisol's pulse fluttered. I promised, and I always keep my promises. He closed his eyes, drifting back into a fitful sleep. Marisol rose, pressing a hand to her chest. Come on, she said, turning to Charlie. We need to push on. They reached the foot of a narrow pass, carved between two rocky outcrops. The trail climbed steeply, its ridges dotted with prickly pear and cholla. Marisol set her brother down for a moment, sliding beneath his shoulders. The rocks cut into her palms. She bit her lip, determination flaring. She lifted him and began the climb. Each step was agony. Her muscles burned, sweat stung her eyes. The sun grew merciless, each ray a blade of fire against her skin. Yet she refused to falter. The memory of Zeke's sacrifice drove her onward. She repeated his name like a prayer. Zeke, Zeke. Charlie fell into step beside her, sweat dripping from his brow. You're doing good, he said gently. He's counting on you. Marisol pressed on. As they ascended, the world opened into a plateau, offering a bewildering panorama, miles of sagebrush stretching to the horizon, distant mountains shimmering in the heat. Marisol's legs wobbled as she set her brother down again, pressing her hands to her knees. I can't, she panted. Charlie knelt beside her, wiping her brow with a bandana. Almost there, just a bit more. He nodded toward a tumble-down log, cabin perched on the edge of the plateau. Its wooden planks were weathered, and smoke curled from the chimney, promising life within. Marisol summoned the last reserves of strength. She lifted her brother in one motion and trudged forward. Each step felt like wading through tar, but the sight of the cabin spurred her onward. As they reached the front door, Marisol's heart thudded in her chest. The door creaked open, revealing a tall woman with fiery red hair pinned back in a braid. Her green eyes widened at the sight of Marisol's blood-stained dress and her brother's weak form. Zeke sent word, Marisol gasped. He said you'd help us. Larkin's expression softened. She nodded and hurried inside, motioning them in. Come in, quickly. He's on his way. Inside, the cabin was warmly lit by a crackling fire. Fur, pelts draped the walls and herbs hung from the ceiling. A sturdy wooden table held an assortment of dried leaves and tinctures. In one corner, a cradle held a sleeping baby. Marisol arranged her brother on a bed strewn with blankets. Larkin knelt, smoothing her brother's dark hair. He's lost a lot of blood, but he'll pull through. Marisol exhaled, relief flooding through her. But she held her breath as Charlie settled near the hearth, slipping to the floor, exhaustion overtaking him. Larkin turned to Marisol, her gaze fierce with determination. What about him? She asked, nodding toward Zeke. Marisol's heart hammered. She closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to her lips. He's in no shape to travel. I need to find him. Please. I can't rest until I know he's safe. Larkin paused, then pulled a heavy shawl from a hook. Take this. It'll hide you from prying eyes. I know a path through the forest that leads to Dustwater Ridge. You can reach him before nightfall, if you hurry. Marisol wrapped the shawl around herself, its woolen fabric cool against her skin. She collected her brother's satchel and slung it over her shoulder. Charlie will stay here with him, she whispered. Tell Zeke I love him. Charlie opened his eyes. We'll both be waiting, Mara. His voice was faint, but his smile held warmth and pride. Larkin led Marisol to the back door. The forest beyond was dappled in afternoon light, each leaf a shimmer of gold and green. The path wound through towering pines, their needles whispering secrets on the breeze. Marisol's pulse raced as she set foot on the trail. She pressed her fingers to her arm, feeling the bruises forming beneath the fabric. She staggered, pressing her hand to her side. The pain flared, but she refused to yield. Each step brought her closer to Zeke. Closer to the fight that awaited them, the forest swallowed her in its cool embrace. Shadows danced across the mossy floor as sunlight filtered through the canopy. Birds flitted overhead, their calls distant and haunting. Marisol's breath came in ragged gasps as she climbed a steep embankment. She pressed her hand to her brother's satchel. Inside lay fresh water and a small loaf of bread. She glanced down at her brother. His chest rose and fell, a testament to Larkin's care and to her own stubborn resolve. As she reached the ridgeline, the world below unfolded in sweeping vistas. Dustwater Gulch lay nestled in a wash of parched earth. Smoke curled from the ramshackle buildings, and in the distance she spotted a column of dust where horses raced. Her heart jolted. She scanned the ground, seeking Zeke's familiar silhouette. Suddenly a voice rang out, a frantic cry that froze her blood. "Mara!" She spun, heart leaping. Zeke staggered over a fallen log, his shirt torn and stained, rifle dangling from one. A hand. Each step seemed to cost him blood and strength, but his eyes burned with fierce relief when they found hers. "Zeke!" Marisol called, sprinting toward him. She reached him as he stumbled forward, arms falling to his sides. She caught him, fear searing her nerves. "You're hurt," he managed a shaky grin, pressing a hand to his shoulder where crimson seeped through his sleeve. "Mara, you came back." Tears sprang to her eyes. She wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face to his chest. "I promised." He kissed the top of her head, voice trembling with exhaustion. "I tried to be back sooner, but they came in force. I lost them, but not before getting shot again." Marisol's heart lurched. "Why didn't you stay with us? We thought you—" Her voice broke. He shook his head, pressing a hand to her cheek. "I needed to keep them off your trail. I knew you'd come. Now we run." Marisol guided Zeke to a fallen tree. She pressed her fingers to his shoulder, her hands shaking. Tears dampened her cheeks as she probed the wound. Ragged cloth clung to flesh. She bit her lip, worry flooding her. A sudden thunderous roar split the air. The mob's leader burst through the trees, gunpowder smoke curling from his pistol. A horde of men followed, closing in. "Mara! Zeke!" he roared, voice laced with fury. "You thought you could run?" He lifted his pistol, aim unwavering. "This ends now." Marisol's breath caught. Zeke half stood, blocking her view. She wrapped her arms around him, pushing him down. "Stay low," she hissed. Marley's shaking voice struggled with terror. "Stay!" A shot rang out. Zeke cried out, blood blossoming across his chest. Marisol screamed, heart fracturing. She knelt beside him, pressing her hand to the wound. "No," she sobbed, voice raw. "Zeke!" The leader stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "It's over, Blackwood. This girl is mine now. No one crosses Dustwater Gulch and lives." Marisol glared at him through tears, her gaze burning. With defiance, "You'll never have her," Zeke rasped, voice fading. "I'll kill you first." The leader laughed, raising his pistol again, but before he could pull the trigger, a rifle crack shattered the air. He jerked, surprise flickering in his eyes as he tumbled backward. Marisol turned to see Charlie emerging from the trees, rifle in hand. Beside him, Larkin knelt, a rifle at the ready. "You should have stayed gone," Charlie growled, eyes cold with determination. Larkin let a second shot ring. The leader's men froze, their faces etched with panic. Some dropped their weapons, kneeling in surrender. Others fled, their morale shattered by Charlie's sharp shooting. Marisol rose, cradling Zeke's head in her lap, tears mingling with dust on her cheeks. Charlie rushed to her side, kneeling on the opposite side. Larkin aimed her rifle at the fleeing men until the woods fell silent. Marisol looked up at Charlie, voice choked. "He's bleeding too much." Charlie pressed a bandana to Zeke's chest, eyes grim. "We need to get him to Larkin's cabin. She's got herbs to staunch the bleeding, but he's losing too much blood." Marisol extracted the makeshift pistol Charlie had given her and laid it at Zeke's side. "If he tries anything," she murmured. Her knuckles whitened as she curled her fingers around the grip. Charlie nodded. "Stay behind me. We'll move him quickly. Then we hold them off." Marisol nodded, turning back to Zeke. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears soaking his cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. He squeezed her hand, eyes fluttering. "Mara, always." He slipped into darkness, and Marisol gripped him fiercely, unwilling to let go. Charlie gathered Zeke's legs. Larkin grabbed him by the shoulders, and Marisol lifted his head. Together, they bore him down the narrow trail toward the cabin. Marisol's tears fell onto the dirt trail as she whispered a promise. "I won't let you die. I promised." But as the forest swallowed their footsteps, Marisol felt a bitter chill. The war for their lives was far from over. Their choices had come with a price, and the shadows of Dustwater Gulch would reach even here. They had won this battle, but the war, and the sacrifices yet to come, were only just beginning. Marisol pressed her palm against Zeke's chest, straining to detect a heartbeat. The ragged breaths beneath her fingertips felt shallow, too shallow. She glanced at Larkin, who knelt in the firelight, her hands smeared with antiseptic and fresh bandages. Charlie hovered at the doorway, rifle cradled as vigilantly as if he were guarding a king. Marisol felt as though the world had shrunk to this cabin, its flickering hearth the only beacon in a storm of blood and desperation. Zeke's face was ashen, his dark hair matted to his forehead. Marisol's fingers trembled as she wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. "Hold on, Zeke," she whispered, voice cracking. "You can't leave me now, not like this." He groaned, eyes fluttering. "Mara, sorry, I—" His voice trailed off as vacillation clouded his eyes. Marisol swallowed hard, setting her jaw. She lifted his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "You promised," she said, voice choked with tears. "You promised we'd ride into the sunset together." His fingers curled half-heartedly around hers. "Always." Larkin worked in tense silence, cleaning Zeke's wound with a saline solution that stung like fire on his torn flesh. She applied a poultice of crushed herbs, sourced from the mountains and nailed down by her knowing hands. The scent of lavender and sage mingled in the cramped cabin, a frail comfort against the stench of blood. And fear! Charlie lowered himself beside Marisol, rested his back against the doorframe, and exhaled through clenched teeth. "He's going to be fine," he muttered, though his hardened gaze betrayed the weight of doubt. "Larkin's the best healer for 50 miles. If she said he'd survive, he'll survive." Marisol met his gaze, her green eyes blazing with desperate conviction. "He has to. We still have a fight to finish." Charlie tipped his head toward the bunk where Zeke's brother lay, pale but breathing. "Your brother's on the mend. You both should rest. You've done enough for one lifetime." Marisol shifted, the ache in her limbs humming like a warning. She glanced at Zeke's brother, who stirred, blinking at the soft glow from the kerosene lamp. They had reclaimed sanctuary in Larkin's cabin for now, but every second felt borrowed, as if each breath she drew could be her last in this scorched world. "I need water," she rasped. She rose, each movement weighted by exhaustion and adrenaline. Larkin passed her a tin cup. Marisol stumbled to the small well outside, each step a blur. She drew water, its icy surface stirring ripples that reflected the night sky. She drank deeply, the cold liquid anchoring her to the moment. With each heartbeat, she felt Zeke's fate hanging between life and death. Inside, she returned to Zeke's side, leaning over him to catch his copper scent, sweat, blood, and something faintly like honeysuckle. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "You can't leave me," she whispered. At that moment, she heard the soft creak of the door. She looked up to see Zeke's brother, now wrapped in a woolen blanket, stepping in with Charlie. His dark hair was damp, his face still pale, but determined. He knelt by Zeke. "He's going to be okay. I told Larkin I'd watch over him." She said he'll pull through, but he needs rest. Marisol squeezed his shoulder. Thank you. Without you, there's no knowing what. A sudden crack of wood echoed from outside, jolting her spine with fear. She and Charlie exchanged a look before. Racing to the window, the silhouettes of horses advanced toward the cabin, hooves thudding against the parched earth. Not again, Marisol whispered, pulse accelerating. Charlie crouched beside her. They're coming for us. They won't rest until we're dead or captured. Marisol's teeth ground together. Let them come. She met Charlie's eyes. We'll show them Dustwater Gulch isn't the only one who bleeds. Charlie nodded. Mara, you need to get him to safety. I'll hold them off. Marisol's heart clenched. I won't leave without Zeke. He shook his head, voice low. You don't have a choice. Marisol. Charlie's voice cracked, a rare display of emotion. He needs you alive, more than he needs. You hear, go, find Mule Ridge. If we push up through the Gorge of Bones, we can lose them. Follow the river. Larkin knows the way. I'll join you, or I'll give my life trying. Just get him and make sure you finish this. Marisol's gaze hardened with resolute fire. She pressed a kiss to Zeke's cheek and rose, lifting him gently from the bed. His brother's eyes widened with horror and sorrow when he realized Marisol would carry Zeke into the night, risking everything. No, Mara, he's too heavy. Let me help you. She shook her head. I promised I will carry him, and you will follow me. Charlie's watching the cabin, this way if he needs help. Now move. The three of them crept into the frosty night. Jennifer's hat passed between them. Larkin had sewn a strip of cloth into Zeke's waistband, allowing Marisol to hoist him like a crude sling. Each step felt like dragging an ocean behind her, but adrenaline steeled her back. They slipped through the brush as cavalry bonnets flitted between pines and sage. Bullets snapped overhead, thudding into the cabin too close to ignore. Marisol ignored the burn in her lungs, focusing solely on putting one foot before the other. They reached a narrow embankment overlooking a shallow ravine. The moonlight revealed a jagged landscape littered with boulders and twisted branches. We'll lose them here, Marisol whispered. Charlie scanned the ground before nodding. Marisol lifted Zeke to her shoulder. His bandaged torso felt as heavy as a boulder, but she refused to yield. His arm slipped around her neck, head lolling as he drifted between consciousness and dreams. Stay with me, she muttered, blinking away tears. Charlie rushed beside her, rifle trained on the incoming riders. Mara, hurry! We don't have time! She bobbed through the brush, careful not to leave a trail of blood drips or broken twigs. Horses thundered above them, hooves carving the earth. Marisol lowered herself into the ravine, pushing Zeke ahead of her. The cold river snaked through the rocky floor, reflecting the moon's silver glow. Her brother, now walking with a careful limp, followed behind, his eyes flicking to the distant figures of Charlie and the cabin. Marisol's breath crystallized in the cold air as she lifted Zeke's broken form. Each step down the ravine's steep embankment risked sending them tumbling into the jagged rocks. The river's current whipped at her boots. Beneath her feet, a slick coating of morning frost spelled a fall that could shatter more than just bones. She pressed on, muscles screaming from exhaustion. Each heartbeat hammered in her ears, a frantic reminder that time was slipping through her fingers. A distant crack startled her. Charlie, holding back a dozen dragoons with a single rifle. His shot shattered a stock, sending a rider sprawling into the brush. But Marisol couldn't help him. Her world narrowed to Zeke's steady pulse and the path slipping away beneath her. She set him gently beside a flat boulder, positioning his head on her lap. Charlie reappeared at the ravine's edge, blood streaked across his forehead but spirit unbroken. He mouthed a single word. Go! Marisol inhaled, pressing her lips to Zeke's burning cheek. Stay with me, she whispered. She turned, sprinting across the boulders toward the river. Each leap felt like jumping across a chasm with nowhere to land. Her brother fell into step beside her, pressing his hand to the makeshift splint. The river's cold hiss echoed below them. She swallowed, forcing herself not to look down. They reached the river's bank just as the first rays of pre-dawn. Sun sliced through the canopy. The cold bite of the water filled her lungs as she waded in, dragging Zeke behind her. The current roared like a freight train, but her arms burned as she pressed on, each stroke a battle against exhaustion. Halfway across, a bullet ricocheted off a rock overhead, the scream of metal against stone echoing through the ravine. She froze, terror ripping through her chest, but the current yanked her forward. She pressed on, lungs searing with the cold as she plunged ahead. They reached the opposite bank, and she collapsed onto the icy shore, Zeke's head rolling onto the damp earth. She grabbed mud-clogged roots and pulled him further from the water's edge. Beneath her, the cold ground chilled her bones. She glanced back. The pursuers had paused at the river's edge, unwilling to risk the same fate. Marisol exhaled, chest heaving, eyes stinging with tears of exhaustion and triumph. Her brother appeared beside her, supporting her as she struggled to her feet. She surveyed the path ahead. A faint trail wound through a dense thicket of pines and firs, away from Dustwater's tyranny. "Mara, you have to keep moving," he urged, voice trembling. She nodded, wiping her tears with a shaking hand. "Come on, Zeke needs shelter." They staggered into the forest. The crisp morning air filled their lungs with a promise of escape, and perhaps a chance at healing. Beyond the trees, they could see the faint outline of a distant ridge, Mule Ridge, where Zeke's claim lay. For hours they stumbled through the forest, using splintered branches to clear obstacles. Zeke's breaths hitched with each cramp that racked his wounded side, but Marisol's words, softer than a lullaby yet firmer than steel, kept him going. At midday they reached a small clearing where the sun bathed a deserted barn. Its planks sagged beneath time's weight. The field, around it, once a thriving meadow, was now a patchwork of scorched earth and wilted grass. But Marisol sensed sanctuary. She pressed Zeke against the barn's shadow, shading him from the sun's vengeful glare. She rummaged through her bag for fresh bandages and water, dabbing his face with cool cloth. Each touch brought a muted sense of relief and dread. Zeke's breathing shallowed and his eyes fluttered. "Mara," he whispered, voice thin. "I can't." She shook her head, brushing a lock of hair from his brow. "You must. For me. For your brother. For the life we both lost. You're stronger than you know." His hand brushed hers, thumb stroking her knuckles. "I'll try." She pressed a kiss to his fingers and turned to her brother. "You know the way to Mule Ridge, right?" He nodded, hobbling toward the barn's broken door. "Follow me! I know a secret path that cuts through the hills. It'll get us there by sundown, if Zeke holds on." Marisol let her brother lead them down a barely visible trail snaking between rocky outcrops. Each step was a gamble. Loose stones threatened to send them sprawling. As they passed through a dense patch of brambles, the wind shifted, carrying a distant rumble. Marisol froze, heart hammering. The rumble grew, morphing into thunderous hoofbeats. Hatred and steel merged in the air as Dustwater's riders surged across a nearby ridge. Marisol's eyes brimmed with tears. "They found us again." Her brother pressed a trembling hand to her shoulder. "Keep moving. He's just ahead." Summoning the last of her strength, Marisol pushed forward, guiding Zeke through the rough terrain. Each breath felt like inhaling razor blades. Her sight narrowed to the path beneath them, a slender ribbon of blood and grit. After what felt like an eternity, they crested another ridge, and words burst from Marisol's lips in a gasp. Mule Ridge. Below them, a cluster of wooden buildings stood against the horizon, barns, corrals, and a modest homestead with a weathered sign reading Blackwood Claim. Smoke spiraled from a stone chimney into the cobalt sky. Smaller figures moved about, ranch hands tending to horses, a few cattle grazing in a fenced pasture. Marisol's breath hitched. They had made it. She turned to Zeke, who slumped against her shoulder, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Tears blurred her vision, as she brushed hair from his forehead. "You're safe now," she whispered. He closed his eyes, gratitude shining in the dim light. "Mara, thank you." She knelt, drawing a thin blanket from her bag. With trembling hands, she wrapped it around his shoulders, the fabric rough but warm. "Rest here. I'll find help." She pressed her palms to his legs. "Don't move," he nodded, eyes fluttering shut. She rose, her legs weakened from the ordeal. She staggered toward the homestead, each step fueled by hope and dread. The ranch hands spotted her and rushed forward, confusion turning to alarm as they saw Zeke slumped against her, one of them, a tall man with sun-bleached hair and a kind but wary expression, knelt beside Zeke. "You're bleeding badly," he murmured. "I'm Caleb Riley, Zeke's foreman. What happened to you?" Marisol's voice shook, but determination edged through her fear. "He was attacked. Please, help him. He's my husband. He needs a doctor." Caleb exchanged a look with a younger rancher, who nodded and hurried off toward the homestead. Caleb pressed a hand to Zeke's brow. "He's unconscious. We'll get him into the bunkhouse. You?" He glanced at Marisol's dirt-caked dress, her weary frame. "You look like you've seen hell itself. Come inside, miss." Marisol managed a tight smile through tears. "Reyes. Marisol Reyes." Caleb helped her carry Zeke toward the bunkhouse. As they reached the door, Marisol felt the weight of the journey lifting from her shoulders and replaced by new questions. What had become of Dustwater Gulch? Would the men come for her and Zeke here? Could she protect him now that they had finally escaped? The bunkhouse door creaked as Caleb slipped Zeke inside. The warmth hit her like a wave, a hearth ablaze against the chill of fear. Ranch hands scrambled to procure clean blankets and fresh water. Caleb laid Zeke on a sturdy cot and began examining his wound, calling for Larkin's herbs and a hot compress. Marisol sank onto a chair, head lolling back as fatigue crashed over her. She blinked through the haze, her vision narrowing to Caleb's concerned face. "He'll make it," Caleb said, voice steady. "Larkin will need a few days to patch him up, but he's strong. He's Blackwood blood." Marisol closed her eyes. Relief and gratitude mingling with a deep, unshakable sadness. She pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart thudded like a war drum. The fury of Dustwater Gulch still raged somewhere beyond the ridge, but here, for the first time, she felt semblance of safety. She thought of Charlie and Larkin, brave souls who had risked their lives to save them. She vowed silently to repay, and them to see their fight through. "Mara," Caleb's voice drew her back, "you should rest. We'll wake you when he stirs." She nodded, unable to speak. She rose, each movement a test of will, and stumbled toward the door. Outside, the sun hovered at its zenith, a blazing orb that signposted a new beginning, even if it was born of blood and sacrifice. Marisol settled onto a bale of hay beneath a cottonwood tree, letting the warm breeze play through her hair. She wrapped her arms around her knees, drawing them to her chest. The world was quiet here, save for the low murmur of ranch hands, the rustle of cattle grazing, and the distant rumble of thunder that threatened an afternoon storm. Her mind flickered to the day she had been sold at auction, the feeling of Zeke's steady hand in hers, the rush of hope that had carried her through the darkest night. She closed her eyes, letting her memories drift like embers. Because she realized through the haze of fatigue, hope was a fragile ember that required guarding. She could not let it die, and as long as her heart still beat, she would fight to keep that ember alive. In the stillness of Mule Ridge, Marisol Reyes discovered something she'd never known before: the fierce power of a girl who refused to surrender. Dustwater Gulch could claim her past, but it would not claim her future. Marisol woke to the scent of damp straw and a distant thunder rumble. Blinking against the sunlight that filtered through a crack in the wooden planks, she realized she slept on the bunkhouse's porch. Exhaustion had claimed her the moment. Zeke was safe inside. Her arms ached from resting on the hay bale, and her throat was parched. The valley's wind whispered through tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of rain and 100 memories of Dustwater Gulch. She rose, muscles stiff in protest, and crossed to the cabin's door. Peering inside, she found Zeke lying on the cot, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Larkin knelt beside him, carefully wrapping fresh bandages on his side. She offered Marisol a small nod, eyes warm with reassurance. Marisol exhaled, pressing a hand to her chest as relief flooded her. Larkin rose, brushing straw from her robes. "He's stable for now, but he must rest. You should too." Marisol nodded, voice thick. "Thank you, Larkin, for everything." Larkin's gaze flicked toward the front of the cabin. "Caleb's waiting for you, says there's work in the barn, but you should only do what you can." Marisol swallowed, stepping past Larkin. The sun's warmth greeted her as she emerged into the open. The bunkhouse yard bustled with ranch hands, repairing fences and stirring horses. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, each a reminder of the world beyond this refuge. Marisol's gaze drifted to Zeke's brother, leaning against a corral. Host, his leg propped up. He caught her eye and offered a weak smile, both of them survivors of Dustwater's cruelty. Caleb crossed the yard, boots thudding on packed earth. "Morning," he said, sliding a fresh pan of water into her arms. "Horse and feed. I thought you might like to clean up." Marisol accepted the water, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Caleb. I'll get started." She turned toward a wooden trough where the water pooled, knelt, and scooped handfuls to her face. The cold slapped to her skin, jolted her fully awake. She pressed her hair back, water dripping from her eyelashes. The ache in her bones eased with each breath, comfort drawn. From the simple act of dawn's ritual, a sudden clap of thunder rolled across the ridge, and the sky darkened. Marisol straightened, brushing her dress free of hay. "Looks like rain." Caleb nodded, eyes flicking upward. "Lightning storms roll in fast this time of year. If you're heading to the barn, be quick." She rose and strode toward the barn, a weathered structure that stood like a sentinel at the edge of the homestead. The large doors hung off rusty hinges, revealing stalls lined with horses. The pungent scent of hay and leather filled her nostrils. She spotted a chest labeled Blackwood Supplies. Amid rusted saddles and empty feed sacks, she discovered a fresh change of clothes. A simple pair of linen trousers and a blouse, unfussy but sturdy. Marisol exhaled, peeling away her blood-stained dress and stepping into the clean garments. They felt like armor, new skin after a lifetime of scarring. As she tied her hair back, Zeke's brother emerged from between the stalls, hobbling lightly on his splinted leg. "You look like a different person," he observed, surprise brightening his dark eyes. "I thought you'd be crawling back to Mule Ridge in that dress forever." Marisol offered a wry smile. "Someone needed to come back to reality. Besides, Zeke needs me away from his wound, not caked in dust and straw." He leaned against a stall, legs crossed. "Zeke asked after you last night. Said he kept dreaming of your face. He's lucky to have you." Her heart clenched, and she nodded, glancing toward the cabin. "I'll check on him soon, but first I need to pay my dues." He pointed to a stall filled with restless horses. "Those need saddles and bridles repaired. Their tack was ripped when that mob tried to cut through. You can start with Tanner's mare. She's the worst off." Marisol moved inside, kneeling beside the mare's stall. She lifted a tattered bridle, her hands tracing the frayed leather. Memories of her mother's gentle guidance flooded through her. Each stitch she sewed mended more than leather. It mended a fragment of her soul. She tidied the mare's mane, loosening snarled tangles and winding ribboned strands until her fingers forgot the ache in her back. A rumble overhead made her look up. Dark clouds swirled above Mule Ridge, thunder echoing like a distant war drum. She pressed her palms to the mare's flank, hand trembling. "Hang tight," she murmured. "You'll be fine." For the next hour, Marisol worked steadily, stitching, tightening buckles, oiling leather, losing herself in the rhythm of each deliberate motion. Occasionally, her thoughts drifted to Zeke, wondering how his pain measured against the storm gathering outside. Her heart tightened and she forced herself back to work. There was no room for pity. The ranch needed her, and perhaps more importantly, she needed them. By midday, a cold rain began to fall. The pitter-patter of raindrops on tin roofs mingled with the horses' uneasy whinnies. Marisol took a break beneath the barn's overhang and watched the water snake across the field. Mud formed in pools, and cattle lowed mournfully as the wind picked up. She pressed a hand to her temple, gathering her thoughts. Caleb walked up, soaking wet yet undeterred. "Storm's getting worse," he said, glancing across the fields. "Zeke's stable has room. Bring him there. He'll need a secure spot once he's able to move." Marisol hesitated, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. He can't move yet. Larkin's still working on him." Caleb's jaw clenched. "I know. Once he's stable, we need to reduce his risk of infection." "Barn air's better than bunkhouse." Marisol nodded, determination stealing her features. "I'll talk to Larkin and make sure everything's ready." She dashed through the rain toward the cabin, water soaking her hair and seeping into her shoes. Lightning rent the sky, and thunder boomed overhead as she threw open the door. Inside, Larkin stood over Zeke's cot, gentlest of ministrations, tracing his wound with gauze. "He's resting," Larkin murmured, not looking up. "He's stronger than I thought. If he holds this fever at bay, he'll walk again." "He'll need a warmer blanket," Marisol said, voice firm. "Caleb wants him moved to the stable as soon as he's able." Larkin studied her. "He needs rest now. If you stand there worrying him, he won't heal. Sit, breathe." Her gaze softened. "All he wants to do is see you. He asked for you. Maybe you should stay by his side for a while." Marisol smoothed her fingertips across Zeke's brow. His hair stuck to his forehead from sweat. "I promised he'd never be alone." Larkin nodded, easing a cool rag across Zeke's cheek. "Promise means little if you end up sick too. You've grown stronger, but even the steeliest woman must rest." Marisol exhaled, sinking onto a stool. She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing through her like floodwaters. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin, and rain pounded. The roof. The world felt both colossal and suffocating. "Mara!" Zeke's voice slipped from unconscious lips, and her heart twisted. "You're here. Didn't think you'd—" He coughed, a ragged sound that made Marisol's stomach drop. She leaned closer, brushing his hair from his forehead. "I'm here. Always." His eyes opened, blinking against the dim light. "I'm sorry I put you through this." She pressed a finger to his lips. "Don't apologize. You saved me long before I saved you. You gave me a reason, Zeke." A faint flush crept across his cheeks. His gaze faltered, revealing something vulnerable she'd rarely seen. "I can't protect you forever." Marisol's voice held an unshakable conviction. "We'll protect each other. That's how this works." His eyes searched hers, gratitude and something deeper flickering. "Mara!" Her pulse hammered. She swallowed, extending a hand. "Rest now. I'll be right here when you wake." Tenderness shone in his eyes before he closed them, drifting between pain and dreams. Marisol lingered, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest, the curve of his jaw. After what felt like both a heartbeat and an eternity, she rose, stepping away as if releasing a prayer. Larkin glanced at her, soft empathy in her gaze. "He'll be okay, Marisol. You need to eat. You're weakening." Marisol drew a breath, glancing at the door. "I'll eat downstairs, but keep an eye on him." Larkin nodded, turning back to her herbs. Marisol stepped outside, the rain's chill seeping through her clothes. Lightning illuminated the valley in brief flashes, like white-hot revelations, that faded into grey. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the chef's cabin, where the ranch hands prepared a simple stew over a roaring fire. The scent of simmering beef and onions greeted her with a hollow comfort. Caleb ladled stew into a tin bowl and slid it across a table to her. He offered a tight smile. "Eat, then come back to him. I'll watch the horses." She stared at the steaming stew, her appetite dampened by worry. "What about Dustwater?" she asked, voice low. "They could be coming here." Caleb met her gaze, resolve firm. "They won't find us. We've dropped the trail. The rain and mud will cover any tracks. They might search Dustwater Gulch, but it won't lead them here." Marisol exhaled, though. Her worry remained. She picked at the stew, each spoonful a battle against fatigue. The wind's howl sounded like a wail for every life lost to greed and hatred. Hours passed as Zeke's fever stayed at bay. Marisol returned to his side as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and blood-red oranges. Larkin replaced his bandages by lantern light, her expression adamant that he must rest. Marisol perched on the edge of his cot, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "I've been thinking," she said, voice hushed. "Once you're healed, we need to go back. For them. Dustwater Gulch doesn't get to terrorize anyone else." Zeke's eyes fluttered open. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, voice a whisper. "Your claim, it's not just a homestead. It's a fortress. Mule Ridge can be the bedrock for something bigger. We can unite the scattered families, those your father left behind, settlers pushed out by the dust. We can build a community that stands up to lawlessness. We fight back." His gaze softened with relief and longing, a hunger for something he had lost. "You want to stay here. You'll be safe." Marisol shook her head, determination blazing in. Her green eyes, "I'm not built for safe. I'm built for change. And you—" She touched his bandaged chest. "You're built for it too. But only if you survive." He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing once more. Marisol felt his warmth, beneath her fingers fragile and precious. She let herself sink into the moment, allowing hope to take root even as the wind rattled the roof. Outside, thunder rolled again, announcing the coming storm. But inside the cabin, a new storm brewed, a storm of purpose and planning, of dreams, forged in blood and sacrifice. Marisol rose and gazed out the window. The valley lay still, hiding countless threats beneath its golden grasses. But for the first time, she felt she had a path, one that carried both promise and peril. She exhaled, steeling herself as lightning lit the horizon. The fight for Dustwater's revenge had been won tonight, but the war was just beginning. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. To be. First drops of rain hammered against the bunkhouse roof, and Marisol felt the cabin close in around her. She gazed out at the swirling tempest, every flash of lightning etching the valley in stark relief. The storm's fury seemed mirrored by the turmoil in her heart. Tomorrow, they would set out toward Dustwater Gulch, Zeke's condition willing. But tonight she needed to prepare. She turned to leave the cabin's interior, but a final thought froze her in place. What if Zeke didn't wake? The thought lodged in her chest like a dagger. She refused to let herself consider that possibility. With resolute breath, she crossed to his cot and placed a final kiss atop his bandages. "You'll wake," she whispered. "I'll make sure of it." Larkin stepped forward, holding a steaming mug of tea scented with mint and chamomile. "Brewed this to help his fever. Give it to him in the morning. Right now, rest." Marisol took the mug, cradling it against her palm, gentle warmth against her chilled skin. "Thank you, Larkin. You've saved him. And me. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Larkin offered a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting the storm's glow. "Keep that fire in your heart. Fight for more than revenge. Build something they can't destroy. That's how you repay me." Marisol nodded, her heart gathering strength from Larkin's words. She retreated to a corner of the room where Caleb had laid a rough pillow atop a rolled-up blanket. She sank onto it, refusing to let exhaustion win. She stared at Zeke's sleeping form, each breath a meditation on gratitude. Lightning cracked the sky, and Marisol's gaze shot upward. The wind's howl sounded like a warning, an omen that Dustwater's final reckoning awaited them. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, closing her eyes as the rain's rhythm lulled her toward a precarious slumber. Her last thought, "We will fight." When the storm ended, the dawn would bring a reckoning, and Marisol Reyes would be ready. Dawn's early light filtered through the thin quilt over the bunkhouse window at Mule Ridge, painting the small room in muted gold. Marisol Reyes sat on the edge of Zeke's cot, her posture rigid with fatigue and vigilance. He lay beside her, his breathing steady but labored, a deep furrow creasing his brow as consciousness fought to reassert itself. Each breath he took flared a dull ache in the bandaged wound across his ribcage, a reminder of the price he had paid. Marisol kept her eyes fixed on him, heart hammering with every shallow rise and fall of his chest. She dared not look anywhere. Eldon, for the moment it would sketch her bloodied past in stark relief. She lifted his hand to her cheek, her fingers trembling. His skin was cool, even beneath the rough woolen blanket. The chanting wind lashed the sagebrush outside and rattled. The window panes, each crash of thunder made her stomach twist, a silent recall of Dustwater's fury. She exhaled, steadying her racing thoughts. Today, she vowed, there would be no more ambushes, no more bloodletting, if she could help it. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. Larkin slipped into the room, bearing a basin of steaming water. Her expression was careful, compassion buried in steely determination. She set the basin on the small table beside Zeke's cot and drew a rag from it. Marisol rose and moved to stand guard as Larkin dampened the rag with the warm water and dabbed at the blood crusting Zeke's bandage. "He slept more deeply last night," Larkin murmured, voice low. "His fever's broken. Now it's a matter of keeping the wound clean and letting his body do the rest." Marisol's chest tightened with relief. "Good. But we can't stay hidden forever. Dustwater's shadows still linger," Larkin nodded, pressing the damp cloth to Zeke's skin. "You need rest, too. Your strength will matter more when you ride west to face them." Marisol's gaze flared with a mix of guilt and resolve. "I can't rest while Zeke bleeds. If I leave him, he'll rest while you prepare. Then you'll ride back together." Larkin's tone brooked no argument. She replaced Zeke's bandages with a fresh dressing, her hands methodical and unshakable. When Larkin finished, Marisol replaced her hand over Zeke's palm. "I'll stay until he wakes." Larkin offered a brief nod before exiting the room. Marisol sank onto a chair beside the cot, her gaze locked to Zeke's face. As the wind whistled against the walls, she let her thoughts drift, back to Dustwater Crack's auction block, to the hawks circling in menace, to the cruel gavel that had sold her life. The irony of being saved by Zeke now sat heavy on her chest. Memories faded as Zeke's eyelids fluttered. He groaned, fingers curling around Marisol's. "Mara!" Her heart seized. "Zeke, I'm here. You're safe." He attempted a smile, but pain cut across his face. I saw them, chasing us." Marisol pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You're safe at Mule Ridge. We need you to rest. Your brother's stable. I've spoken with Caleb. He'll bring you food and water until you're able to ride." Again, Zeke's dark eyes searched hers. "I should be out looking for them, making sure you're safe." She shook her head, determination blazing. "You risked everything for me and your brother. Now I'll risk everything back to be sure they never harm anyone again, but I need you to live for that fight." His gaze flickered with something that was half pride, half despair. "I'm not much without my strength. Can you ride without me?" Marisol's jaw set. I'll ride west into Dustwater. I'll show them that a girl sold at auction can come back with a war party, Mule Ridge's finest, and we'll finish. This. He closed his eyes, exhaustion weighing on him. Then bring me peace when you return. Marisol nodded, squeezing his hand. I'll bring you peace. He drifted back into feverish sleep. Marisol exhaled, her thoughts already turning to strategy. She rose and left the bunkhouse, breathing in the crisp morning air. A light drizzle fell, the ends of raindrops lingering as though hesitant to fall fully. The valley stretched around her. Mule Ridge's rolling hills and pastures looked serene. But Marisol saw the potential for defense and rally. Caleb Riley was waiting near the corral, boots planted firmly on the sodden earth. His foreman's jacket was damp, yet his stare was unwavering. Marisol approached each step deliberate. "How's he?" asked Caleb, nodding toward the bunkhouse. "Stable," Marisol replied, her voice urgent but steady. "Larkin's doing miracles, but I need to mobilize soon." Caleb's brow creased. "You sure? Dustwater throngs still roam the plains. No telling when they'll strike again. Have you got a plan?" Marisol met his gaze with a fierce intensity. "We ride at first light tomorrow. Gather whoever we can. Ranch. Hans' neighbors. Anyone wronged by those thieves. We'll descend on Dustwater mid-morning when they least expect it. We'll catch them between the saloon and the general store, pin them before they can scatter." Caleb regarded her, a slow nod acknowledging her conviction. "Then I'll ready the men. You want them armed or unarmed?" Marisol exhaled. "Armed. Rifles, shotguns, anything that holds true. But we'll approach as if unarmed, cattle suppers, casual greetings. We'll lure them into their own pit." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You've thought this through. You know those men won't hesitate to shoot first." She let out a shaky breath. "Then they'll see who the true bandits are. We'll take no prisoners, only enough to send a message. Dustwater must never rise again." Caleb nodded solemnly. "I'll gather the men, meet back here at dawn, rest a few hours." Marisol watched him trot off, her heart pounding. She pivoted, feeling the soft ground beneath her boots give way to thick mud. The valley's beauty masked a cruel destiny. Tomorrow, she would lead an assault against the very town that had sold her like livestock. Her thoughts flickered to Zeke. She could almost feel his gaze of pride and worry, urging her onward. She returned to the bunkhouse, passing the stable where his brother lay recovering. The old mare Marisol had tended stood in her stall, clipped and groomed, never happier to be saddled with fresh reins. Marisol paused to slip a soft pat along her flank. The mare whinnied softly, as if sensing Marisol's tension. "We both have battles to fight," Marisol whispered into the mare's ear, voice hoarse with unshed tears. "Tomorrow, we ride with purpose." She gathered the extra tack from the shelf, extra saddlebags, bedrolls, rations, and packed what supplies she could. A length of rope, several pistols, a coil of wire, and a few medical herbs gifted by Larkin. She wore trousers and a linen shirt, leather boots, and a well-worn duster coat, her only armor against the uncertain dawn. By midday, the rain had passed, leaving a fresh chill. Marisol stoked the bunkhouse hearth at Zeke's request and filled a pan with porridge for him. She carried it to his cot, setting it beside him and laying a damp cloth at his forehead again. His eyes fluttered open at the familiar sound of her heavy boots against the wooden floor. "Mara," he spoke in a rasp, but with more strength than before. "You're going after them." She knelt beside him, her gaze unwavering. "I am. I'm taking Mule Ridge's finest to Dustwater. We'll end this. But you promised me peace. You're my anchor. I need you to stay strong." A thin smile crossed his lips. "Just come back alive. That's all I ask." She leaned down and pressed her lips to his brow. "I will, and when I do, we'll start anew. Mule Ridge will be our home for both of us." He closed his eyes as she set the porridge aside. "I'll hold. On to that. Marisol rose and stepped outside. The late afternoon sun lit the valley in warm gold. Farmers tended fields, a few cattle grazed in the far paddocks, and birds darted among the fences. For a moment she let her gaze roam, allowing the calm to permeate her bones. She listened to the distant clip-clop of horses and the low murmur of ranch hands preparing for the morrow. Then, as the wind shifted, she sensed a subtle change, an unnatural hush, as if distant ears strained to eavesdrop on her thoughts. She closed her eyes, letting the memory of Dustwater's saloon doors sliding open guide her. A stream of outlaws, their faces twisted in contempt. Tomorrow they would meet her in their own courtyard. Night fell, and Marisol gathered with the ranch hands around a fire pit in the yard. Caleb and his able riders, 8 men in all, listened intently as she laid out her plan. Ride at first light, approach Dustwater with caution, feign goodwill, then strike swiftly. Horses saddled and fluids rationed, they confirmed their commitment with nods and murmurs of agreement. Marisol's pulse pounded each time she spoke Zeke's name, every beat an echo of her love and fear. She scanned the faces around the fire, men hardened by Mule Ridge's fierce winters, by cattle rustlers, by a world that asked for everything and gave back little. Now they rode to fight for a cause both personal and righteous, to ensure no one under the sun would ever see a child sold again. As the embers glowed beneath a star-studded sky, Marisol walked to the corral once more. The mare stamped impatiently. Sensing the weight of expectation, Marisol knelt, rubbing her cheek against the mare's muzzle. "We ride at dawn. Keep your strength." She rose and mounted, finding the mare's back familiar and steady. The wind carried the distant sound of a coyote's howl. Marisol inhaled, feeling her resolve crystallize. Tomorrow she would cross a line, one that separated vengeance from justice. And beneath her, the mare shifted, as though ready to thrust her forward into the storm. Marisol sat tall in the saddle, her gaze towards Mule Ridge's ridgeline, where Zeke's figure would soon emerge to join her for the ride west. A thin sliver of moon guided her thoughts. By the time it set, Dustwater's fate would be sealed. She closed her eyes, willing herself to rest, though her mind refused to silence itself. When fear danced at the edges of her thoughts, she breathed. In Zeke's name allowed it to be her compass. In the darkness, she whispered her vow. Dustwater will burn, but their legacy will die in its ashes. I will see it done, no matter the cost. And with that, Marisol Reyes, rescued from the auction block and baptized in blood, surrendered to sleep's embrace, her dreams haunted by the key of Dustwater's streets, her heart ready for the war that would come with dawn. The horizon's pale pink glow barely broke the darkness as Marisol guided the mare from Mule Ridge's corral toward the unknown road ahead. Her heart's steady drumbeat matched each hooffall on the dew-drenched grass. Below, Zeke Blackwood emerged from the bunkhouse, his arms slung over Larkin's shoulder for support. The rising sun glanced off his pale face, stripped of stubble, but his eyes burned with determination. Though his wound still pained him with every breath, he pressed himself forward, refusing to let weakness define his return. Marisol watched him mount with the same careful grace he had taught her weeks ago. His thin frame hunched slightly to accommodate his bandaged ribs, but pride straightened his back. His brother followed, hobbling beside them on a mule, the red horse he had named Rowan's Promise. Surrounded by the 6 ranch hands, Caleb Riley at the lead, his rifle slung across his back, Marisol felt both feral exhilaration and an icy dread. Each man was armed with Winchester rifles or double-barreled shotguns. Saddlebags hung heavy, with ammunition, dried jerky, and a few coffee beans to stave off the morning chill. They moved as one, a silent hunting pack of ridgefolk riding west across parched fields. The slope downward was steep at first, then leveled into rolling hills. The sun climbed higher, painting the low clouds in brushstrokes of orange and gold. From this vantage, the landscape seemed endless, broken only by a solitary windmill clawing at the sky. The dusk of Dustwater Gulch lay nearly 20 miles to the west, but Marisol focused on each foot of ground beneath her. Her thoughts flitted to the day she had been sold, a 13-year-old linked by a fragile hope. The memory of that auction block, the crack of Clay Marston's gavel, slid into her consciousness like ice water. She forced herself back to the present. Today, she would close the circle. She was no longer the timid girl, but a leader standing on the cusp of retribution. The first light of morning edged the ragged peak that jutted from Dustwater's dry, dusty landscape. The town's silhouette emerged, a cluster of weathered wooden buildings crowding the street, flickers of motion behind shuttered windows. Smoke from a single chimney drifted lazily upward, a testament to the sleepy ignorance of its inhabitants. Marisol signaled for the group to halt. She slid from her saddle and knelt, rubbing her gloved palms together for warmth. Zeke dismounted, leaning against his mare's flank. His brother paused at her side, nodding as they conferred in hushed tones. "They'll open the saloon doors." "At sunrise," Marisol muttered, eyes narrowing. "When they see us riding in, that many horses, they'll come out in force. We pretend to come for trade. Men needing work, cattle drives needing passage. They'll lower their guard. That's when we strike. Keith's blacksmith reputation. It'll buy us time." Caleb shifted, resting his rifle on his shoulder. "We've got to be quick. Once they see the rifles, they'll scatter. Some will run north, others toward the hills. If we close the gap fast, we box them in." Marisol's pulse quickened. "Tanner's barn is where they'll stash weapons, shotguns, sawed-off. Rifles. They'd never think a girl could take it. We cut them off there." Zeke's brother, whom Marisol now thought of as Jonas, for that was his name, gripped his leg brace. "I'll help. If I have room, I'll ride with one of them." Marisol offered a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "You ride with Caleb. They'll sweep the east side of town. Zeke and I will cut through the north alley. We meet at the saloon's back entrance. No hesitation, no mercy." Jonas nodded, his eyes shining with breeded loyalty to his brother. "Let's finish this." Caleb's voice, low and resolute, issued orders. "Ranch hands, line up behind me. No shooting until I raise my hand. We sway them with words. Need to buy feed. Get them focused. Then we show them the rifles." The men dismounted, hooves thudding. On the dirt, Marisol remounted and followed Zeke as they led the advance. The town emerged as they crested a slight rise. Dustwater Gulch's unruly main street lay below, colored in 10 shades of brown and gray. A windmill creaked in the distance, and the adobe church's steeple caught the rising sun. The air smelled of dry tumbleweed, of dust stirred by unseen cattle herds. Marisol's knuckles whitened on the reins. She swallowed, directing her gaze to Zeke. He nodded, his pale lips tightening. She nudged her mare forward, crossing the ridge's edge. The group cascaded down the slope in a loose V formation. At the bottom, horses stirred the early hour's dust into a flurry of motes. A few townsfolk peered from shuttered windows, curious, sleepy. 2 kids, their faces streaked with soot, ran from the general store, chasing a stray dog. "Rider's respite," Caleb called, tipping his hat. "We're looking to buy supplies, oats, maybe some gear for cattle drives." Dustwater's main street bustled hollowly to life. A lanky clerk emerged from the general store, yawning. "Gallop out of the dust, boys? What can I do for you?" Caleb strode forward, teeth caught between strategy and sincerity. "We need feed, quality hay for horses crossing the plains." The clerk's brows rose. "Quality. You must be from the big ridges then. We got some eastern grass. I can fetch you a bale. But it won't come cheap. Costs more than a train boxcar out east." Marisol's gaze flicked to the saloon, its swinging doors still closed, a lull of calm before the storm. Zeke brought his mare alongside her, whispering, "Perfect. Don't show your cards." Marisol nodded, restraining the urge to raise her pistol. "Yes, sir." Lead me to your finest. The clerk hustled inside, leaving the sliver of early morning light to bounce off hunched windowsills. Caleb's men gathered near the general store's side entrance, their rifles hidden beneath oilskin coats. Jonas hobbled forward, crutches tucked beneath his arm, and mounted one of Caleb's spare horses, his brother's pale glances urging caution. Moments passed as the clerk labored to fetch a bale of hay. The mightiness of Muleridge's war party had lulled the clerk into trusting complacency. Marisol caught the flicker of shifters behind the windows of the barber shop and tinny laughter rising from the tavern. The faint odor of stale whiskey drifted in the air like an omen. Suddenly, Zeke let out a low bark. Shops lining the North Street, rifle barrels poking out of windows. They know we've come for blood. Marisol exhaled and turned her mares. Head toward a narrow alley between the barber's and the dry goods store. Now! Caleb's hand shot up, and his men raised their rifles from hidden slings. A chorus of confusion rippled through the townsfolk. Doors slammed, and a rickety wagon screeched to a halt at the edge of the street. Men in dust-caked hats rushed. From the saloon's swinging doors, sheriff's badge glinting under the sun. "What's the meaning of this?" the sheriff growled, his voice a thunderclap that drew all eyes. "Riflemen on the main. By order of the town council, you're under arrest." Caleb stepped forward, rifle leveled at the sheriff's heart. "Arrest us for wanting feed? Either you talk or you die." Those words shattered the fragile veneer of Dustwater's. Calm. Shotguns roared from the saloon's second floor, where Dean Merritt, Dustwater's de facto kingpin, had seized arms from the saloon's storehouse. The reports echoed from shuttered windows and hollow storefronts. The horizon's pale pink glow barely broke the darkness as Marisol guided the mare from Muleridge's corral toward the unknown road ahead. Her heart's steady drumbeat matched each hooffall on the dew-drenched grass. Below, Zeke Blackwood emerged from the bunkhouse, his arm slung over Larkin's shoulder for support. The rising sun glanced off his pale face, stripped of stubble, but his eyes burned with determination. Though his wound still pained him with every breath, he pressed himself forward, refusing to let weakness define his return. Marisol watched him mount with the same careful grace he had taught her weeks ago. His thin frame hunched slightly to accommodate his bandaged ribs, but pride straightened his back. His brother followed, hobbling beside them on a mule, the red horse he had named Rowan's Promise. Surrounded by the 6 ranch hands, Caleb Riley at the lead, his rifle slung across his back, Marisol felt both feral exhilaration and an icy dread. Each man was armed with Winchester rifles or double-barreled shotguns. Saddlebags hung heavy, with ammunition, dried jerky, and a few coffee beans to stave off the morning chill. They moved as one, a silent hunting pack of ridgefolk riding west across parched fields. The slope downward was steep at first, then leveled into rolling hills. The sun climbed higher, painting the low clouds in brushstrokes of orange and gold. From this vantage, the landscape seemed endless, broken only by a solitary windmill clawing at the sky. The dusk of Dustwater Gulch lay nearly 20 miles to the west, but Marisol focused on each foot of ground beneath her. Her thoughts flitted to the day she had been sold, a 13-year-old linked by a fragile hope. The memory of that auction block, the crack of Clay Marston's gavel, slid into her consciousness like ice water. She forced herself back to the present. Today, she would close the circle. She was no longer the timid girl, but a leader standing on the cusp of retribution. The first light of morning edged the ragged peak that jutted from Dustwater's dry, dusty landscape. The town's silhouette emerged, a cluster of weathered wooden buildings crowding the street, flickers of motion behind shuttered windows. Smoke from a single chimney drifted lazily upward, a testament to the sleepy ignorance of its inhabitants. Marisol signaled for the group to halt. She slid from her saddle and knelt, rubbing her gloved palms together for warmth. Zeke dismounted, leaning against his mare's flank. His brother paused at her side, nodding as they conferred in hushed tones. "They'll open the saloon doors." "At sunrise," Marisol muttered, eyes narrowing. "When they see us riding in, that many horses, they'll come out in force. We pretend to come for trade, men needing work, cattle drives needing passage. They'll lower their guard. That's when we strike. Keith's blacksmith reputation, it'll buy us time." Caleb shifted, resting his rifle on his shoulder. "We've got to be quick. Once they see the rifles, they'll scatter. Some'll run north, others toward the hills. If we close the gap fast, we box them in." Marisol's pulse quickened. "Tanner's barn is where they'll stash weapons. Shotguns, sawed-off. Rifles, they'd never think a girl could take it. We cut them off there." Zeke's brother, whom Marisol now thought of as Jonas, for that was his name, gripped his leg brace. "I'll help. If I have room, I'll ride with one of them." Marisol offered a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "You ride with Caleb. They'll sweep the east side of town. Zeke and I will cut through the north alley. We meet at the saloon's back entrance. No hesitation, no mercy." Jonas nodded, his eyes shining with breeded loyalty to his brother. "Let's finish this." Caleb's voice, low and resolute, issued orders. "Ranch hands, line up behind me. No shooting until I raise my hand. We sway them with words. Need to buy feed. Get them focused. Then we show them the rifles." The men dismounted, hooves thudding. On the dirt, Marisol remounted and followed Zeke as they led the advance. The town emerged as they crested a slight rise. Dustwater Gulch's unruly main street lay below, colored in 10 shades of brown and gray. A windmill creaked in the distance, and the adobe church's steeple caught the rising sun. The air smelled of dry tumbleweed, of dust stirred by unseen cattle herds. Marisol's knuckles whitened on the reins. She swallowed, directing her gaze to Zeke. He nodded, his pale lips tightening. She nudged her mare forward, crossing the ridge's edge. The group cascaded down the slope in a loose V formation. At the bottom, horses stirred the early hour's dust into a flurry of motes. A few townsfolk peered from shuttered windows, curious, sleepy. 2 kids, their faces streaked with soot, ran from the general store, chasing a stray dog. "Rider's respite," Caleb called, tipping his hat. "We're looking to buy supplies. Oats, maybe some gear for cattle drives." Dustwater's main street bustled hollowly to life. A lanky clerk emerged from the general store, yawning. "Gallop out of the dust, boys. What can I do for you?" Caleb strode forward, teeth caught between strategy and sincerity. "We need feed, quality hay for horses crossing the plains." The clerk's brows rose. "Quality? You must be from the big ridges, then. We got some eastern grass. I can fetch you a bale, but it won't come cheap. Costs more than a train boxcar out east." Marisol's gaze flicked to the saloon, its swinging doors still closed, a lull of calm before the storm. Zeke brought his mare alongside her, whispering, "Perfect. Don't show your cards." Marisol nodded, restraining the urge to raise her pistol. "Yes, sir. Lead me to your finest." The clerk hustled inside, leaving the sliver of early morning light to bounce off hunched windowsills. Caleb's men gathered near the general store's side entrance, their rifles hidden beneath oilskin coats. Jonas hobbled forward, crutches tucked beneath his arm, and mounted one of Caleb's spare horses, his brother's pale glances urging caution. Moments passed as the clerk labored to fetch a bale of hay. The mightiness of Mule Ridge's war party had lulled the clerk into trusting complacency. Marisol caught the flicker of shifters behind the windows of the barber shop and tinny laughter rising from the tavern. The faint odor of stale whiskey drifted in the air like an omen. Suddenly Zeke let out a low bark. Shops lining the North Street, rifle barrels poking out of windows. They know we've come for blood. Marisol exhaled and turned her mares, head toward a narrow alley between the barber's and the dry goods store. "Now!" Caleb's hand shot up, and his men raised their rifles from hidden slings. A chorus of confusion rippled through the townsfolk. Doors slammed, and a rickety wagon screeched to a halt at the edge of the street. Men in dust-caked hats rushed from the saloon's swinging doors, sheriff's badge glinting under the sun. "What's the meaning of this?" the sheriff growled, his voice a thunderclap that drew all eyes. "Riflemen on the main? By order of the town council, you're under arrest." Caleb stepped forward, rifle leveled at the sheriff's heart. "Arrest us? For wanting feed? Either you talk or you die." Those words shattered the fragile veneer of Dustwater's calm. Shotguns roared from the saloon's second floor, where Dean Merritt, Dustwater's de facto kingpin, had seized arms from the saloon storehouse. The reports echoed from shuttered windows and hollow storefronts. Marisol's heart hammered. "Zeke, cover me!" She dropped from her saddle into the alley's entrance, drawing her pistol with lightning speed. Zeke followed, sliding behind a stack of timber. Splinters flew as Caleb's men returned fire. Aerial, shots tearing tin can lids from roofs. Jonas, his pain momentarily forgotten, lifted his rifle with one shaky arm, finding his aim enough to send the sheriff's horse rearing. Marisol sprinted down the alley, ignoring the sting in her side as a stray bullet scraped her ribs. Her boots thundered on the high stones. Doors burst open, arms brandished from second-floor windows. She vaulted over a laundry rack, its cloth fluttering like a frightened bird, and emerged onto North Street's narrow plank walkway. Dean Merritt stood atop a wooden barrel, clutching a sawed-off shotgun. His moustache trembled as he barked orders. "Keep them pinned. No one leaves alive." Marisol leveled her pistol at him, her pulse a war drum in her ears. "Merritt, you have one chance to stand down." He laughed, a sound as ragged as a scorpion's. "Hiss, you think a girl with a pistol can face Dustwater's fury? Aim for the head. Let's see if she bleeds too." He fired, the blast framing Marisol in a veil of splintered wood. The bullet whined past her cheek, scorching her hair's edge. She felt a hot rush of fear, but a steely determination blazed in her gut. She fired before her gun jolted upward. Her bullet found its mark in Merritt's shoulder, knocking him from the barrel. He tumbled against the wooden planks, a cry of agony shredding the day's fragile calm. Marisol's world narrowed to blood and survival. She sprinted forward, her pistol spitting flame at the henchman rushing toward her. One man lunged from shadow. Marisol sidestepped, her blade catching him in the leg. He fell, clutching at the wound. The acrid stench of gunpowder and sweat clouded her senses as she sidestepped again, raising her pistol at a second assailant. Her shot rang off his shoulder, and he crumpled. Above, rifle barrels appeared at windows. Another shot grazed her thigh. Pain seared her edges and her breath caught. She gulped air, the dust between her teeth gritty and bitter. She cursed under her breath and pressed on. Through the chaos, a sudden crack of thunder rattled the sky. Lightning branched across the sun, a white-hot slash that froze motion for a heartbeat. Marisol seized the moment. She dashed across the street toward the next building. She kicked the door open, weapons or not, and raced through a darkened barbershop. Strands of hair dangled from chairs, mirrors shattered, and the floor was slick with inky water. She burst through the back door into an alley barely wide enough for a man to pass sideways. Caleb, crouched beside Zeke's mare, called her name. "Marisol, this way!" She skidded to a stop, feverish tears stinging her eyes. She stumbled across the mud-draped alley, swallowing every sob. Around her, the crackle of rifle fire and the clang of cavalry sabers on scabbards. Dustwater's militia had mounted horses. They charged down the main street, scattering dust like a whirlwind. Marisol reached Caleb and Jonas, breath ragged. "I'm hit," she rasped, pulling aside her coat to reveal the blood-soaked linen. Caleb's face knotted with worry. "Not too badly. I've seen worse. Zeke, he's pinned down in the alley toward the saloon's rear exit." "We need to get him out." Marisol grimaced, fear clawing through her bones. "What about you? Will you hold them off?" He nodded wearily and led her to the narrow back alley flanked by brick walls and shuttered windows. The muddy earth was stained, red by the fallen. She saw Zeke sprawled at the alley's entrance, his mare's reins clutched in his quivering hand. One of Dustwater's riders, an ox of a man with a cruel sneer, loomed above him, revolver trained on his head. "Your sister. Might be a quick draw," the rider sneered, spitting on the ground. "But your brother's finished." Zeke lay still, bruised and battered, his head lolling backward. He mustered every ounce of will to lift his gaze to Marisol. A silent plea flickered in his eyes, hope that she could save him. Marisol tightened, her grip on her pistol. "Drop the weapon," she called, voice steely, though blood heated her mind and stung her vision. "Stand down now, or I shoot." The rider's sneer twisted to contempt. Myriad options flickered through Marisol's mind. A fatal shot, a reckless clanging of steel, a desperate gamble. With a mocking laugh, he tightened his fingers on the trigger. "You think you scare me?" He spat at Zeke. "Let's see if the lady's bullet's true." Time slowed to a vapor as Marisol's finger curled on the trigger guard. In the same breath, Zeke's mare reared from behind, her nostrils flaring like a war drum. The rider jerked, startled. The mare's next movement was a thunderclap of hooves that crashed down on the rider's leg, sending him sprawling backward, into broken wooden crates. The rider's pistol fired wildly, a bullet tearing through the alley's brickwork. Marisol seized the moment. She bolted, leaving behind sparks of pain that ignited her side with each step. She vaulted over the mares, trembling back, grabbing the rein. With a swift twist, she yanked Zeke's mare around, its hooves hammering against the wet earth. The mare's strength surged, kicking the rider's legs and snorting terror into the man's heart. He yelped, surrendering the pistol as the animal pinned him to the ground. Marisol dismounted, weapon still drawn. She rushed to Zeke's side, pressing his head to her chest. He choked out a breath, pain etched across his face. "Mara, shh, easy, easy," she murmured, guiding the mare's reins around her wrist. "We've got you. Hold on, I'm not leaving you." She brushed a tear from her cheek, her voice a tender caress amid the thundering of hooves echoing outside the alley. Caleb and Jonas slid to a stop behind her, guns trained on the slain rider. Jonas's lance-like gaze flicked to Zeke. "He's alive?" Marisol nodded, pressing Zeke's arm across his abdomen to stanch the bleeding. "Barely, but alive. Help me get him onto the mare." Together, they heaved Zeke onto the animal's back, careful of his bandaged torso and the mounting tide of blood. The mare snorted, stomping the dirt with quivering hooves. Marisol straddled her twisted mane, Jonas supporting Zeke's aching limbs. Caleb's eyes darted toward the alley's entrance. Dustwater's militia reined in their horses at the alley's mouth, 9 sets of furious eyes glaring. Marisol held her pistol high. "We're leaving, and if you move—" A volley of gunfire cracked through the air as one of the riders aimed. The bullet struck the mare's flank, eliciting a high-pitched whinny as the mare spun in panicked circles. Zeke cried out, clutching his side. Marisol pressed her horse against Zeke's mare, 3 horses now tangled in a frenzy of fear and pain. "Ride 'em!" Caleb shouted, spurring his horse forward. The ranch hands behind followed, their rifles blazing a hail of defiance. The dust flew in choking waves. The rider who had held Zeke captive now struggled to rise, clutching his leg. His eyes flicked to his fallen comrades, some stretched across the street, some desperately scrambling. For cover, a second rider lunged for the fallen man's gun, but was met with a hail of bullets from Caleb's men. Marisol pushed her mare forward, guiding Zeke's steed toward the alley's exit. She opened her mouth to shout reassurance to Zeke, but the world narrowed. Adrenaline, fear, and a fierce love coalesced into a single purpose. They burst from the alley into Dustwater's main street, leaving behind the shouts of the injured and the cries of the dying. Dustwater's saloon, its wagons and its cluster of storefronts blurred around them. The ranch hands formed a protective wall behind Marisol, Caleb's rifle breaking rifles from the rear. Jonas struggled to maintain his mount's balance as Zeke slumped further to the side, chocolate-brown hair matted with sweat and blood. Marisol's pulse pounded as she urged the mare forward. "South Ridge! We need to reach the ridgeline!" Her cousin, another ranch hand named Pike, spurred his horse alongside, shouting, "They're pushing around the west block! We'll be boxed in!" Marisol glanced left. A group of 3 riders galloped. From the blacksmith shop, their rifles trained on her party. The blacksmith's heavy-set bodies held grudges older than any of them, fueled by bitter memories of lost profit. She took a deep breath, jaw setting. "Caleb, take the flank. Shake the blacksmiths off. Jonas, with me. Keep Zeke protected." Caleb leaned in, engine of defiance in his eyes. "Understood. Stay with Zeke. I'll circle him." With that, Caleb spurred his horse, diving west. The blacksmiths opened fire, one bullet grazing Caleb's shoulder as he dipped behind a row of lampposts. He returned fire, and the clash of gunpowder sparked with the flash of arcing rifles. Marisol pressed her mare to a gallop. Jonas on Zeke's mare, she on her own. They thundered out of Dustwater's ruined artery. The town's main street shrank. Behind them, stricken with silence, broken only by the occasional crack of a rifle. The shrill cry of a departing horse, wounded by stray lead, shattered the morning's calm. They jockeyed for position on the ridge's flank, where a gnarled mesquite tree offered scant shelter. Jonas shoved Zeke's mare beneath the tree's stunted shade, and Marisol dismounted as quickly as she could. She cradled Zeke's head, her cheek pressed to his. "You're going to be fine, I promise." His eyes fluttered open. "Mara, I'm here. You're alive. Breathe, just breathe." He nodded weakly. A dribble of blood seeped from his mouth. This is it, isn't it?" Tears pooled in Marisol's dark green eyes. "No, not yet. We still have one fight to finish. Dustwater must pay for what they took, but first I'm getting you safe." Jonas dismounted and knelt beside Zeke. "We need to get him to Larkin's. Keep that fever down. If we stay out here, Marisol shook her head. "We ride north, through the Tallow Creek Canyon. Larkin knows the path. Let's go." They secured Zeke's head on Marisol's lap, and Jonas pushed the mare toward the path. Marisol mounted behind him, one arm wrapped around Zeke's chest. Jonas guided the donkey through a narrow corridor of rock and thorn, each step more treacherous than the last. The sun rose higher, and the canyon's walls loomed at Marisol's shoulder, their heights blotting out the sky. The wind rattled the branches overhead, and the dusty path narrowed until only one hoof at a time could pass. Jonas groaned as the mare's hooves skidded on loose gravel. Marisol gripped tight around Zeke's waist, her own boots pressed against the donkey's flank. "Shh! Easy," she murmured, voice tight. "You'll make it. Larkin's waiting." Zeke's head lolled. I'm sorry. Everything Marisol pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Rest, my love. We'll all be together soon." His eyes fluttered closed. The world narrowed to the toll of her heartbeat in his ear, the pounding of the mare's hoofbeats on stone. Suddenly, a thunderous crash echoed through the canyon, Dustwater's riders in hot pursuit. Marisol's blood froze. She shot a frantic glance over her shoulder. 4 mounted riders lurched around a boulder, their rifles leveled and smoking. They had not given up, their faces twisted with a savage gleam. "Hold on," Marisol called to Jonas. "Faster!" Jonas urged the mare onward, but the path narrowed further, forcing them to squeeze through a choke point of boulders. The riders closed. "The distance," one yelled. "They think they can hide behind rocks. You can't outrun Dustwater." Marisol brandished her pistol, but the canyon's walls acted like a funnel. A bullet whined past, grazing the donkey's haunch. The animal balked, pitching Zeke against Marisol's hip. She struggled to keep her balance, her side burning with pain, as a bruise blossomed beneath her ribs. The riders raised their rifles to fire again. Marisol drew another pistol from her belt, taking aim at the nearest man. She fired, a crack of defiance that rang against the canyon walls. Her bullet caught the rider's arm, sending his gun clattering to the gravel. He howled in rage and lashed his reins, spurring his mount forward. Jonas urged the mare through the choke point as the rider lunged at Marisol's donkey with a saber. In that split second, Marisol glimpsed her brother in arms, poised to strike her head. She begged the mare to move. Jonas shoved the animal from behind. Its hooves found traction on solid ledge just as the saber slashed through the donkey's. Rump! The scream that followed gripped Marisol's gut, a harsh reminder of Dustwater's thirst for cruelty. She leaned close to Zeke's face, blood seeping from his lips. "Hold on, please, hold on." Her tears fell on his cheek, mixing with dust and sweat. Jonas urged the mare around a sharp bend, but the third rider had outpaced them, spurring his horse onto a narrow ledge above the path. He blocked the exit, a broad-shouldered brute with cruel eyes and a glinting blade. The murderous intent in his stare left no doubt. He intended to finish what Dustwater had started. Marisol grit her teeth as the mare staggered beside him. She reached for her pistol with trembling hands, but her vision blurred with dread. The rider dismounted, towering over Jonas and her, raising his blade high. Jonas's eyes widened with terror. Marisol squeezed Zeke's hand, as though her grip alone could keep him alive. Jonas hissed beneath his breath, ready to shield Zeke no matter the cost. Marisol's pistol discharged, but her aim faltered, splintering the boulder's face instead of the rider's leg. The man laughed, a sound as cruel as a rattlesnake's rattle. He advanced, blade glinting ominous in the sunlight. Marisol raised her other pistol, the muzzle aimed at his center of mass. "Stay back," she said, voice raw with defiance. He chuckled, shedding his pistol to brandish the saber with both hands. "Girl, you're heading for the grave." Marisol's pulse thundered, the light from the sky pooling in her vision. She felt her strength ebbing, the weight of Zeke's body growing heavier with each breath. Jonas lifted his rifle, but he could only manage a single hand to steady it. The rider took a step forward, booted foot crushing loose gravel. Time slowed to a crawl, her finger on the trigger, the saber's cold blade raised in triumph. Jonas's weapon wavered in his fist. Marisol's heart leaped. Suddenly, a rifle barked from above. The third rider's horse shied, and he tumbled backward. The sudden crack startled those in the canyon. Caleb, his form emerging over a ledge. High above, rifle in hand, the third rider's horse reared, sending him crashing across the path. Caleb re-aimed, sending a bullet through the final rider's hat. The blade clattered to the ground. Marisol exhaled, her body trembling with relief and fury. She knelt beside Zeke, cradling his head as she pressed her cheek to his. His eyes fluttered, open, focus dimmed but alive. "Mahara, thank God." She ran her fingers through his hair. "I'll always find you." Her voice rang with simple truth. Beyond them, the wind rustled the canyon's lip, carrying the echo of Dustwater's last rider scrambling toward the ridge. And as the morning sun climbed higher, spilling its light into the canyon like a benediction, Marisol knew the battle was not yet over. But for now, Zeke lived, and she would go to any length to keep him breathing. She lifted her gaze, her eyes burning with resolve. Tomorrow, they would return to Dustwater, together. End of Part 7, cliffhanger. Would return to Dustwater to finish the fight. The canyon's shadows stretched long in the late afternoon sun as Marisol guided Zeke's duplicate mare through the winding trail toward Larkin's cabin. She moved like a spectre, a lean silhouette of determination against the ragged cliffs. Zeke lay draped across her back, each breath a tremor of pain that echoed through her chest. Jonas held the donkey's reins, leading both animals with care as if each step might be their last. Behind them, the roar of Dustwater's riders faded into the distance, swallowed by the canyon's unforgiving geometry. The world narrowed too, the path ahead and Zeke's shallow breaths. Marisol's mind replayed every moment of the ambush, the flash of the saber, the heat of blood, the despair in Zeke's eyes when his mare reared. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus on the here and now. Every beat of her heart was a prayer that Larkin's hands could mend what bullets and brimstone had torn. The path spilled them into a narrow clearing ringed with juniper and mesquite. The smell of sage filled the air, a fragrant promise of refuge. Larkin's cabin lay nestled beneath a rocky overhang, smoke curling from its stone chimney, a beacon of hope. Marisol slid from her mare, legs trembling like wounded fawns. She lowered Zeke to the ground, gently cradling his head on a bed of moss Jonas had gathered. Larkin appeared at the cabin door, her face etched with worry and relief. "Get him inside, now," she hissed, as rain began to patter against the rocks. Overhead, Marisol and Jonas hoisted Zeke to his feet, each movement measured to avoid jarring his wounded ribs. Larkin reached out with a cloth soaked in herbal tincture, lavender, arnica, and willow bark, to stem the fever that once again threatened to claim Zeke's body. Inside, the cabin was a swirl of shadows and golden lamplight. A pot of boiling water hissed on the hearth, and tincture jars lined the shelves. Larkin guided them to an earthen floor bed, warmed by skins and blankets. She laid Zeke down with gentle precision, probing his wound with trembling hands to assess whether infection had set in. Marisol knelt beside him, brushing stray strands of hair from his bruised face. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. He exhaled a faint laugh, his fingers curling around her hand. "I won't let you. Not now, not ever." Jonas knelt beside Larkin, watching as she cleaned and rebandaged Zeke's wound. "He's lucky to have a sister like you," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "I owe you everything." Marisol's eyes glistened. "We owe Larkin more." Larkin glanced up, her gaze warm yet unyielding. "You both owe your lives to each other. Rest for now. Zeke needs sleep. Marisol, you've been through hell, but tomorrow you face the next stage of this fight." Marisol pressed a kiss to Zeke's forehead before rising. She moved to a small wooden stool beneath the lone window and collapsed into it, the weight of everything she'd endured crashing into her like a tidal wave. Her ribs ached, each breath a reminder of her wounds. Rain drummed the roof overhead, a lullaby that soothed and tormented in equal measure. Jonas hovered in the doorway, rifle balanced across his shoulder. "I'll keep watch," he said softly. "Rest now. I'll call you if anything happens." She nodded, her eyes drifting shut as fatigue claimed her. The scent of herbs and damp earth filled her lungs as she slept. The next morning rose pale and hazy, the rain's residue clinging to every leaf and stone. Marisol awoke to Larkin's gentle shaking. "He's stable for now," Larkin whispered. "Your fever's down and the wound's clean, but you've been sleepless. Today you need to regain your strength. Rest a bit more. I'll bring you tea." Marisol nodded, exhaustion clouding her senses. She sank back onto the cot, each breath deep and slow. Larkin retreated, footsteps soft on the floorboards. Outside, Jonas and a handful of ranch hands from Mule Ridge tended to the animals, mucking stalls and repairing reins. The rattle of feed buckets and low calls to the horses blended with the forest's dawn chorus. Marisol inhaled the scent of pine and rain-moistened earth, each inhale soothing. Her battered soul, Larkin returned with a steaming cup of mint tea. "Drink this slowly," she instructed, pressing the mug into Marisol's trembling hands. "It'll help with the bruising and quell any returning fever." Marisol took a careful sip, feeling warmth spread through her limbs. "I have to go back," she muttered, her voice a rasp. "I have to finish what I started." Larkin's gaze hardened with maternal ferocity. "Finish this fight, yes, but not until you're well. If you ride west without strength, you'll be burying Zeke again." Marisol's jaw tightened. I can't stay hidden while Dustwater roams. They'll rebuild their tyranny, selling children, terrorizing settlers. I promised Zeke we'd end this. Together. Larkin placed a hand on Marisol's shoulder. Then you'll end it. But today, you gather your allies. You build a plan that ensures no child is ever sold again. Rest, we'll rendezvous tomorrow at dawn. Outside, Jonas appeared at the window. He beckoned Marisol to follow. She rose, tea in hand, and stepped onto the porch. Jonas led her to a small outbuilding, a modest stable. Inside, 3 of the ranch hands waited, Pike, Holt, and Avery, stalwart men who had followed Marisol from Mule Ridge. Marisol, Pike began, his voice low but steady. We've been discussing. We're with you every step. We'll ride with you to Dustwater, but we need a plan that doesn't get us killed. Marisol nodded, placing her tea on a post. Tomorrow. At sunrise, we slip into Bungaree's Hollow, she said, voice soft yet firm. It's a narrow gorge that leads into the back of Dustwater. We avoid the main road, bypass their lookouts. We cut in behind their stockyards where they keep slaves and stolen cattle. We strike from the rear so they can't escape. Holt's dark eyes narrowed. But if they have guards posted, they might see us. Marisol's jaw set. That's where Jonas comes in. He knows the path. They'll never see you in the morning shadow. Once we're inside, we chain the saloon doors and set them ablaze, destroy their stronghold. Then we free any captives and claim their wealth, horses, supplies, and disperse. Their families in Mule Ridge and beyond will know Dustwater's fate. Avery rubbed his chin, nodding. Good. But we need to know if they've got reinforcements. Sheriff Pembroke survived your ambush. He might call for help. Marisol's green eyes flashed. Larkin can't be there, but we can. Jonas stepped forward. Zeke will recover, but he's lost his strength. He can't ride this mission. He asked me to tell you, don't look back. He'll hold Dustwater's people accountable in his own way. When? He's well enough. Right now he needs time. This is your fight. Marisol's chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to argue, but she knew he was right. Zeke's destiny lay in recovery now. Her path led to Dustwater's heart. Then we ride. Tomorrow, at first light. Pike exhaled, relief mingled with adrenaline. I'll gather the horses at dawn. Holt and Avery will scour the saloon's floor plans. Jonas and Pike will scout the path. Marisol nodded, forging determination from her doubts. We move at 5:30. Day breaks at 600. Be ready. They left the stable, each returning to their chores. Marisol exhaled, stepping onto the rain-soaked ground. The sky had cleared to brilliant cerulean, the air fresh and sharp. She gazed toward the ridgeline, where Mule Ridge's silhouette belted the horizon, Zeke's claim, their home, waiting for her return. She knelt beside Larkin's herb garden, roots dripping with water. She plucked sprigs of lavender and rosemary, collecting them carefully in her satchel. If we succeed, tomorrow we'll burn the saloon to the ground, she murmured, but not before we free every soul shackled within its walls. A hawk circled overhead, its cry a mournful ode to every child sold, every life shattered. Marisol clenched her fists, turning toward the forest. This ends tomorrow. Marisol awoke before dawn, the cabins inside cloaked in darkness. She slipped out silently, each step a testament to her resolve. The sky's faint glow tinted the eastern horizon, a promise of rebirth. She met Jonas and the ranch hands at the stable. Horses were saddled, resplendent in their coats, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Each man moved with a solemn reverence. They were about to reclaim lives lost to cruelty. Jonas approached, eyes torn between hope and sorrow. He sent you a note before he fell asleep, said, "Bring peace or never return." Marisol's throat tightened. She bit her lower lip, her face a mask of unwavering determination. I will bring peace. They mounted in silence, the horses' hooves crunching gravel as the group formed a loose echelon. Marisol rode beside Jonas, her thoughts flicking to Zeke, his battered form resting within the cabin's safety. She would see him again once this fight was finished. They set off, weaving through Mule Ridge's outskirts. Ribbons of dawnlight filtered through the pines, and the morning chill bit at their cheeks. At Bungaree's Hollow, the canyon's mouth yawned, a narrow cleft splitting the ridge. Jonas dismounted and pointed to a faint trail etched into the rock. "Here, follow me." Marisol slid from her saddle, lifting Zeke's mare's reins to steady her. She felt the forest's hush, only the soft whistle of wind in the pines and the distant drip of dew from leaves. The path's entrance was masked by roots and brambles, a natural choke point perfect for concealment. She nodded to Holt and Pike, then followed Jonas into the darkness. The canyon's walls loomed, towering 20 feet above them. Lichened slick stones reflected faint moonlight. Their horses moved carefully, nails tapping on stone and brass bells jingling softly. Marisol felt every ripple of the earth beneath her. Halfway into the gorge, Holt paused. "They've set up a guard post at the upper ledge, 2 rifles. Marisol's pulse quickened. "Then we take them out silently. We can't afford gunfire yet." Holt nodded, unslinging his knife. With careful stealth, the men slithered along the wall, approaching the guards silently. Jonas steadied his breath. Marisol's heart pounded in her ears as she crept beside Holt. The guard's rifle lay across his lap as he rested against a boulder, one eye on the path below. Marisol rose onto her toes, lining up a shot with her suppressed pistol, something she had crafted in secret for this very moment. She exhaled slowly, squeezing the trigger. A single click sounded louder than thunder in the canyon's hush, and the guard slumped forward with a gurgle. Deftly, Holt and Jonas bound the guard's hands and gagged him, then dragged him behind a bush. Marisol exhaled, her breath visible in the cold. "Good work. Let's move." They continued through the narrow corridor, the ridge's final turn revealing a faint sliver of Dustwater's rooftops below. The saloon's dark windows glimmered. Smoke from a morning fire curled into the pale sky. Marisol's chest tightened as she surveyed the town from above, a dense cluster of weathered buildings, each one potential trap or stronghold of cruelty. "They've set up more guards in the courtyard. Around the stockyard gates," Jonas whispered. "No way around it. We have to strike here." Marisol nodded. "Once the sun's up, we move southeast toward the stockyard entrance. We cut the stockyard fence at the back, release the captives. Then we hit the saloon's rear door. Ready your rifles, on my mark." The group saddled themselves at the canyon's mouth, each person adjusting their grip on their weapons. Marisol's gaze flicked to Jonas, his jaw set with devotion to his brother's cause. She swallowed, drawing destiny into her lungs. When the sun had risen to half-blade over the ridge, they spurred their horses into Dustwater's northern fields, galloping across the dew-lashed grass. The valley floor opened wide before them. Townsfolk, rising late to labor and trade, looked up in confusion. Some ran for cover, others gaped, a few reached for weapons. Caleb, leading the flanking party from the west, burst through the stockyard's main gate, rifle blazing a path of authority and terror. Tiger show of horse steel buckled beneath him as ranch hands held their line. Dustwater's sheriff and a small posse charged, but Caleb's men formed a firing line. A single synchronized volley ripped through the rising sun, cutting the sheriff's posse to 2 wounded and 1 retreating. The stockyard's wooden fence splintered under Holt's swinging blow. "Get them out!" he roared. Men scrambled through broken gates, liberating shackled laborers, young boys and girls, beaten wives, broken elders. Fear and hope danced in their eyes as they fled toward safety. Marisol's heart swelled at the sight of freedom breaking like dawn. She urged her mare toward the saloon's rear entrance. Jonas guided the donkey toward the alley behind the barn. Marisol dismounted, splayed against the cool brick outside the unmarked door. Her hand hovered over. Her pistol, surveillance, would be tight. She heard the clang of Colt guns cocking within, the murmur of men sharing drinks and laughter inside. The saloon's walls reeked of stale whiskey and cigar smoke, a hive of vice and greed. She exchanged a look with Jonas. He nodded, gripping his rifle. Marisol crept to the door's hinge, easing it open. Dustwater's saloon interior spread. Before her, 4 tables scattered across the pine floor, a bar along the far wall, and a feigned sense of calm. The saloon's proprietor, Dean Merritt, sat with his lieutenant at a high table, cigars smouldering between their fingers. Merritt's eyes flicked to the door as Jonas's silent silhouette materialized behind Marisol. "Look at what the wind blew in," he sneered. "The girl who thinks she can play hero." Marisol stayed low, her pistol trained on the kneeling barmaid behind the counter. "Release them," she ordered, "or we'll bring this place down around your heads." Merritt's lieutenant laughed, a sound that ricocheted off the walls. "You can't even stand straight, girl. You're bleeding. You think your ragtag cattle thieves can bring Dustwater to its knees?" Marisol's spine stiffened. "One barrel of gunpowder can burn a town. And you sold a girl for silver. You let that weigh on you. Remember it. Today, we redeem what's been stolen." Footsteps on the creaking boards alerted them. A dozen of Dustwater's gunmen rose from seats along the walls, handguns drawn. Marisol's pulse pounded, each tick a hammer striking steel. Jonas's presence behind her masked any sign of fear. Pike and Avery burst through the front doors, rifles raised, drawing a simultaneous hail of shots from Merritt's posse. The sound was deafening, lead tearing through wood, splintered furniture, screams of surprise. Marisol's mare snorted outside, uneasy in the dusty street. She ducked behind a bar post as Jonas fired from the doorway, each shot a promise of retribution. A bullet slammed into the mirrored back of the bar, shattering it in a cascade of glittering shards. The chaos twisted around her, men diving beneath tables, chairs upended. She fired twice more, each bullet finding contract in a hat or shirt. Her third shot struck the brim of Merritt's hat, sending him reeling from the table, upended by sheer force. Merritt staggered, crimson blooming at his temple. He fell backward, colliding with a chair, sending drinks and glasses crashing to the floor. He clutched the wound, his breathing ragged, eyes wild with disbelief and pain. The lieutenant's jaw tightened as he raised his pistol to defend him. Jonas's rifle barked, severing his arm's motion. He dropped to his knees, a look of shock painted across his face. Marisol stood in the center of it all, her vision narrowed to the few feet between her and Merritt's limp form. "It's over," she rasped, her voice low with steel and sorrow. "Your reign ends here." Merritt's bleeding head lolled, his gaze flickering between Marisol and Jonas. "You think this saves you? You're just another bloodied fool? Like your brother?" Marisol's jaw clenched. She strode forward, each step heavy with purpose. She knelt beside Merritt and grasped the gun from his numbed fingers. He tried to let out a scream, but his breath caught. She leaned in close, letting the barrel of the pistol graze his temple. "No," she said, voice near whisper. "This saves me. Now you'll get to face your victims before the law does, or what counts as law in Mule Ridge." She rose, turning her back on Dustwater's fallen tyrant. Jonas leaned in, one arm around Marisol's waist, guiding her to the door. Pike and Avery gathered the last of the dust-choked survivors, guiding them outside to the relative safety of the stockyard gates. Marisol paused, one hand hovering over the doorframe as she looked back at the saloon's wrecked splendor. The bar that once spat shade and slander was now a ruin of blood and shattered dreams. Her heart constricted, remembering the auction block where she was sold, the nails in her soles, the heat of the sun on her skin. That girl had no choice. This woman had taken it back. "Let's go," Jonas said quietly, his eyes warm with pride and sorrow. She followed him outside, stepping into the blistering light of Dustwater Gulch. The main street was quiet, save for splintered boards and abandoned chairs. A few townsfolk peeked from behind shuttered windows, faces ashen with shock. Caleb and the ranch hands approached from the stockyard, leading small groups of freed captives, battered wives, broken children, and gaunt elders, souls once sold. as property. Their eyes found Marisol's, tears of gratitude and disbelief warring on their faces. Marisol exhaled, each breath a silent vow. "Dustwater Gulch will never stand again," she said, voice echoing across the scorched street. "Not if I can help it." And as the sun climbed higher, its glare illuminating the town's shattered dreams, Marisol Reyes understood. Though the battle was won this day, the war for justice and for her own future had only just begun. Dustwater Gulch lay in ruin beneath the sweltering midday sun. The saloon's charred beams smoked where flames had licked the roof and smoldered into ash. Splintered tables and broken chairs littered the street, caked with mud and the dried stains of spilled whiskey and blood. Horses from the Mule Ridge contingent pawed the dust, their brief exults dwindling to anxious whinnies as they sensed unrest settling in the air. Marisol Reyes stood in the center of the ruined courtyard, her hands still stained with soot and blood. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to will clarity into her thundering thoughts. Around her, townsfolk, once cowed and broken, emerged from the shadows of shuttered windows and ramshackle storefronts. Their eyes, glazed with fear and awe, fixed on her as though she were a specter of retribution. Jonas moved at Marisol's side, supporting Zeke Blackwood, who appeared pale but resolute. Though his ribs were still bandaged, and each breath seemed borrowed from a miracle, Zeke's eyes burned with fierce pride. He had regained enough strength to stand, and the sight of Marisol's unwavering gaze seemed to anchor his wavering resolve. Caleb Riley dismounted from his mare and strode toward them, heels clicking against the sun-baked planks of the wooden sidewalk. Sweat gleamed on his forehead, but his posture remained unbowed, a testament to Mule Ridge's resilience. Behind him, Pike, Holt, Avery, and the other ranch hands formed a protective semicircle, rifles slung at their backs, but at ease. Caleb's deep voice cut through the silence. "You've done it, Marisol. Dustwater Gulch, once a seat of greed and cruelty, kneels before your resolve." Marisol's jaw tightened as she regarded the gutted saloon. "We freed the captives, reclaimed the stolen horses and cattle. But this town still stands on a foundation carved from shame. We must decide its fate." A hush fell as the townsfolk stirred. A gaunt man, his face etched with lines that spoke of years of toil, stepped forward. He addressed Marisol with trembling reverence. "You saved us from becoming cattle, from our children becoming property. What will you do with us now?" Marisol inhaled, meeting his gaze. "No one here asked to be sold. No one here deserves the fate Clay Marston and Dean Merritt dealt. Them, if you choose, Mule Ridge will offer you refuge, land, work, and fresh start. We will not leave survivors to the ghosts of Dustwater." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. A young woman, her skirt frayed and stained, raised her voice. "And if we stay, if we want to rebuild?" Marisol's eyes softened, sorrow glinting. Beneath her resolve, "Then you must hold yourselves to a higher code. No child shall ever be sold again, no debt so heavy it binds a soul. This land will be a place of justice, not despair. But if you can't uphold the promise, your days here will be numbered." The man who had spoken nodded slowly, voice thick with emotion. "We will stand by your terms. We have nothing left but those who stand beside us." Marisol exhaled, relief flickering. The thought of Dustwater's families choosing to rebuild humbled her. "Then it begins now. We ride back at dawn to Mule Ridge. We'll carry the freed souls, the captives, and the orphans. From here, Dustwater will be a memory, never to be." Repeated, the man, a former blacksmith named Solomon, stepped forward and bowed his head. "We accept your mercy and your judgment." Marisol nodded, gesturing to the ranch hands. "Round up the captives, tend to their wounds. Jonas, check the corral and gather any license or deeds you can find. This town's records need to be burned. Let's ensure no one can resurrect Dustwater as it was." Jonas saluted, rifle held at shoulder. He darted into the buildings to root out any lingering threat. Marisol moved to a battered bench and rested her elbows on her knees. She allowed herself a moment's respite, letting the weight of every stolen childhood settle upon her like a cloak. Behind her, Zeke pressed a hand to her back. "Don't bear this alone," he whispered. "You've carried us all this far. Let me carry you now." Her muscles trembled at his touch, but her voice remained firm. "I'll carry us, for all of us, until the nightmare truly ends." Dusk settled, like a velvet cloak across the valley, as Marisol and the Mule Ridge contingent prepared to depart. The freed captives, children and elders alike, huddled in makeshift wagon enclosures, soothed by blankets and the promise of safety. The air smelled of dried sage and ash, each stir of wind carrying the memory of smoke. Marisol mounted her mare, her boots still crusted with mud and blood. Beside her, Zeke climbed into the lone seat of a covered wagon, the diagnosis from Larkin, still fresh in his mind. A lingering fever might strike again if he overexerted himself. Jonas boarded at Zeke's side, remaining vigilant, even as he offered a reassuring smile. Caleb led the column, the throbbing hooves of horses striking the ground in unison. Pike and Holt flanked the rear, guns at the ready in case remnants of Dustwater's militia tried to harass their passage. The freed families rode in wagons and on sturdy stock, escorted by Avery and a handful of less injured ranch hands. As they set off down the rutted dirt road, Marisol took her place at the front, her gaze fixed on the distant ridgeline of Mule Ridge. The setting sun painted the sky in swathes of violet and gold, casting long shadows across Dustwater's empty streets. The town, once a hub of mercantile greed, flickered behind them like a candle flame, ever on the verge of being snuffed. A gentle breeze picked up, carrying a soft tune from the corral, a ragtag group of children humming a lullaby from their homeland. Marisol's heart clenched. They were the future, souls innocent of the sins that had shackled them. She closed her eyes, letting the melody anchor her to the promise she had made. Jonas rode alongside her, his face calm yet resolute. "We'll be in Mule Ridge by dawn," he said softly, voice low to avoid rousing the youngest sleepers. "There they'll make plans, homes, schools, a place to call their own." Marisol nodded, her gaze tracing the path ahead. "We'll ensure they never know Dustwater's cruelty again. We'll build new memories." Jonas's expression flickered with admiration and concern. "And you? What will you build?" Marisol's voice caught as she answered, "A life beyond revenge, a place for Zeke and me, where no child is ever sold." He nodded, understanding deeper than words could convey. The sun had risen by the time they crested Mule Ridge's final hill. The valley stretched out below, golden pastures dotted with grazing cattle, smoke curling from chimneys, and the modest splendor of the Blackwood homestead. Mule Ridge's barns stood like vigilant sentinels, ready to welcome the weary travelers. As they descended, Marisol felt a surge of hope. The distant sound of clanging iron and hammer strikes greeted them. Ranch hands, likely Caleb's already, at work repairing fences and preparing feed. A banner had been raised at the homestead's entrance. "Welcome home, freedom seekers," emblazoned in bold letters, a testament to Mule Ridge's commitment to its word. Zeke stifled a cough, drawing Marisol's attention. She pressed her mare to a gentle trot, closing the gap between them and the homestead. When her mare's hooves met the soft turf of Mule Ridge's paddock, Marisol slid from the saddle and ran to the wagon. Jonas helped her steady the door as they began unloading. Young mothers lifting children, relieved fathers guiding their offspring to safety. Larkin, standing under the porch of the main house, raised her hand in greeting. She waved to Zeke and Marisol, her expression a blend of relief and hope. Marisol felt tears welling. "He's safe," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. He's alive. Zeke's pale face cracked into a lopsided grin as he leaned from the wagon, his hand reaching for hers. "I'm home," he rasped, voice hoarse but triumphant. Marisol wrapped her arms around him, brushing her lips against his forehead. "You're home to stay." Behind them, the freed families streamed onto the ridge, laughter breaking through exhaustion. They were met by Mule Ridge's council, a small but determined group of ranchers and settlers prepared to offer land, supplies, and new beginnings. Solomon, the former blacksmith, approached with his torn sleeves and grateful eyes. "We will not forget Dustwater's lessons. We will build a community of respect and mercy." Marisol nodded, her heart soaring. "We will teach our children what true justice looks like." The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating fields ready for sowing, fences awaiting repair, and the promise of a fresh start. Mule Ridge's yellow wildflowers swayed in the breeze, as if celebrating, yet in the back of Marisol's mind, a whisper of doubt tugged at her. Revenge had been a powerful salve, but it had cost blood and innocence. Dustwater's ghosts might rest in ash, but their echoes could still shape the future. She drew Zeke's hand to her heart. "Together, we can stand against those echoes," she spoke softly. "We can build a future that never forgets the past, but refuses to repeat it." He squeezed her fingers. "As long as we breathe, we shape that future." She exhaled, the valley's sunrise filling her with resolve. "Then let's build it." But as the council gathered to welcome the new arrivals, Marisol's gaze drifted toward the distant ridge above Dustwater, where stones rattled with silent secrets. For every freed soul, a lingering question remained. Would the sins of the past remain buried? Or would the scars carved into Dustwater's bones demand another reckoning? As she watched the sun climb, Marisol felt the dark weight of that question press upon her. She drew Zeke close, whispering, "We will guard this new world, no matter the cost. But the night is young, and our story is not done." Her words hung in the air, a promise as fragile as dawn's first light. The fight for justice might be won today, but tomorrow would bring new challenges for their fledgling community, for the children who would grow up under Mule Ridge's watchful gaze, and for the ghosts of Dustwater who still lingered in the wind. Marisol Reyes gazed toward the horizon, her silhouette bathed in morning's gold. Tomorrow she would face whatever came next, and her resolve would not falter. The dawn's first light splintered the horizon as Marisol Reyes braced herself in the doorway of Mule Ridge's council hall. The ornate wooden doors, carved with symbols of justice and unity, swung closed behind her with a low thud, sealing out any lingering echoes of Dustwater Gulch. At last, their fledgling community could breathe without fear. Inside, the council table lay scattered with maps and petitions. Ranchers, freed families, and elders who had once cowered beneath Dustwater's yoke sat side by side, gazes fixed on Marisol. Their eyes shone with gratitude and cautious hope, a fragile promise that justice had prevailed, but healing had only just begun. Marisol's muscled shoulders sagged with fatigue and relief. The events of the past days, each grueling battle, every bullet pulled from flesh, each tear shed for lost innocence, had brought her to this moment. She allowed herself a breath before stepping to the head of the table, her gaze sweeping the myriad faces. Jonas, standing at her side, nodded toward the open windows where a gentle breeze carried the scent of wild sage. "The freed families have begun sowing fields outside the ridge," he reported, voice steady. "Children will soon fill the makeshift schoolhouse Larkin is constructing. Zeke's meadow is being prepared for new homes." Across the table, Caleb Riley leaned forward, elbows resting on rough-hewn wood. "We've started forging a council of representatives from every family here. Solomon will lead the reconstruction of the blacksmith shop. He's already recruiting apprentices among the boys." Marisol pressed her lips together, relief thawing to resolve. Dustwater's ashes can't be forgotten, but they can nourish new growth. We'll build roads connecting these fields to Red Mesa beyond, ensuring no one here has to rely on a single tyrant again. A ripple of murmurs spread as the community embraced her vision. At that point, Zeke Blackwood entered the hall, leaning slightly on a cane, a testament to the slow healing of his fractures and the fierce life that would not be extinguished. Though his bandages had been removed, faint scars traced his ribcage and the bruise-laced arch of his cheek. Yet his eyes burned brighter than any sunrise, fixed wholly on Marisol. He approached her, each step a testament to survival. "Marisol," he whispered, voice raw yet resolute. "Look how far you've brought them. Look how far you've brought me." Tears mingled with dawn's glow in her green eyes as she rested her hand on his shoulder. "We did this together, Zeke. No one here, no one in Muleridge will ever let tyranny rise again. But our work is far from over. Together, we'll ensure every child learns to read, every family learns to heal, and every believer that cruelty cannot stand is given room to grow." He met her gaze with a fierce tenderness. "And you, Marisol, deserve all the world. You've given life where there was only despair." Her throat tightened. Before she could respond, the council's eldest member, an elderly woman named Faye Morgan, rose from her chair. "I speak for many when I say we choose to stay here. We choose to honor Dustwater's memory by forging a better future. Those who wish to leave for Muleridge's pastures may do so, but we will stand our ground. Here, our children will learn freedom. Here, we will remember, but not repeat." Marisol exhaled, a single breath that carried the weight of so many struggles. She nodded to the council elders assembled at the table. "We'll help you build schools, homes, and markets. We will establish a charter, a code of law that ensures no judge above the law can sell a soul again. Truman Lee will oversee the official documents." Truman, a lean man with spectacles perched on his nose, stepped forward and placed a leather-bound ledger on the table, its pages blank but awaiting the ink that would fill them with shared rights and responsibilities. Marisol offered a small, triumphant smile. "Let our story be the first entry. Let every signature here be a vow. Never again." One by one, hands reached out to grasp ink-dipped quills. The scratch of pen on paper echoed like a clarion call across the hall, each name a testament that Dustwater's ghosts had been banished. Later that afternoon, the valley's wind carried the soft strains of children's laughter to Marisol's ears. She stood at the edge of Zeke's meadow, where freshly ploughed furrows rippled toward the sky. Rows of squat cabins rose amid the tall grasses, homes planned for the freed families. Zeke knelt beside her, smoothing the soil with gentle hands. "Capable. Hands grow the strongest roots," he murmured, his eyes tracing the new foundation they had forged. Marisol pressed a seed into the earth, a hardy wildflower that would bloom in defiance of Dustwater's cruelty. As she covered it with soil, she thought of her mother's lullabies and the auctioneer's gavel that once sealed her fate. Now she planted hope in their wake. "We'll plant more tomorrow," she said, "and every day after, this valley will blossom, with second chances." Zeke rose, his arm offering steady support. "You've given them all a new song to sing and a place to call home." Marisol leaned into him, her sunlight against his shadow. Together they gazed across the ridge, where Dustwater Gulch lay silent, a place of memory rather than menace. She shook her head, a quiet smile touching her lips. "Muleridge was never my final hope. It's this valley, these people, this future we're forging. And I promise, as long as I breathe, no child here will ever know the weight of someone's coin." He kissed her temple. "Together, always." They walked hand in hand, the wildflowers at their feet a testament to their journey, tender shoots rising from the ashes of a past that would not define them. Behind them, Dustwater's ruins held only echoes, while ahead, the valley's promise glowed with irrevocable light. In the stillness of Mule Ridge that evening, Marisol sat on the porch of her new home, a modest cabin overlooking the valley. Zeke sat beside her, his hand cradling hers. The sky shimmered with 1,000 stars, each one a silent witness to their trials and triumphs. Marisol exhaled, a soft sigh of contentment. "It's quiet now," she said, voice a whisper. "But tomorrow brings new vows, fields to sow, lessons to teach, and a future to build." Zeke brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "And every vow will be kept, because we've earned it." Marisol closed her eyes, letting the night enfold her. "We will, together." She opened her eyes to the moon's gentle glow, reflecting hope's quiet promise in her gaze. She leaned against Zeke, feeling the sturdy beat of his heart. A rhythm, steady as time. Tomorrow the fields would sprout, the children would learn, and the valley would thrive. But tonight, as the world slumbered under a blanket of stars, Marisol Reyes savored the peace she had forged with her own hands. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.